Whoa, what was that? There it is again. Oh, phew, it was just an interesting hook to start my presentation. All right. Well, I'm David Repart, and for my project, I did a trash PSA for the school. But this ended up going a lot further than that, so we'll talk a bit about that today. But first, let's talk about me, because that's the most important part of this, right? Me. I am David Repart. I am in the Art, Hospitality, and Education pathway, and I am a video editor. This is a photo from last year when I won first place to show I can win first place graciously, if you all keep that in mind while scoring. So my background interest that led me to creating this sort of video project. I have been a video editor for roughly 11 years, a good video editor for roughly 4. I have done many projects like the CCHS experience and other PSAs throughout my career that have led me up to this point. I'm also not a magician. I have a lot of random stuff that moves around on my slides, so I figured I would clarify this. Previous people have asked me if I'm a magician. The most I can do is like remove my finger. I'm not a magician. I'm just a guy that knows PowerPoint. So my driving question that led me through this. How can I use my passion for editing to promote better trash disposal and a cleaner community? So to help me find the answer to this question, I asked my professional consultant, Andrew Fisher. I chose him before I was not allowed to choose someone within the building, luckily. He is a drama teacher and one of the film teachers here at the high school, which is helpful because he was able to help me with managing people and with videos. With that practical knowledge and being heavily accessible, there is no better mentor for this project. So let's start off a bit with the timeline of how I worked through this. I started off my project like I start most of them, with this. It's what I call the idea funnel. Basically, you start off with a really broad idea and then watch it as it slowly gets into a smaller idea and you have your ideal setup. I was really going to go with a short film or a music video, which those are pretty broad, and I was excited to do them, and I realized that's just something for me. Not something that really benefits my community, not something that will have a lasting impact. I can go a bit bigger. So for my other concept, a PSA. I was considering doing a trash or phone PSA. I ended up making both, but after I made the trash PSA, I got reached out to by Mr. Summers, who suggested to me taking it a bit further. And I really liked that idea because I enjoy making that bit of an impact. So we did a trash pickup. My goal is to gather as many volunteers as I can, plan out the assignments for those different groups of volunteers, and execute this with that clear timeline of one single block to pick up as much trash as we can. So I did the trash pickup, it went well, and then I used the footage for that in my final PSA. So let's take a brief look at that. I got you a brand new copy, fresh out the box. We're not going to watch all the way through because it is a full 2 minutes, which is about 20% of my time. So I just figured I'd start off by showing this. We have a bit of an intro with some random B-roll of students littering to catch attention. We then go into an interview section where we have other students talk about their experience with trash around CCHS and why it's important for them to pick up. We then end with a small call to action showing footage from the pickup and including some shots like this one here, if I can pause. If you look at just how much trash we were able to pick up as a small group, it is just really cool, in my opinion at least, that we were able to capture so much trash. Look at that. That is trash that is now off the streets because of this project. Then of course I ended it with a small credits reel to thank everyone who helped me throughout this project. Let's go on to a bit of the purpose and goal behind why I did this project. Over the course of the year, we have trash and litter to our community and our school. And I want to show to our school, and more importantly our community, that we want to be those good neighbors and that we want to do better. So I figured what better way than by doing a tangible result that shows that we are willing to pick up, and by going further and encouraging the students through a PSA and a video to pick up their trash better. Now let's start getting to the actual traits part of it. Knowledge of reading, writing, and communication. That is absolutely the wrong way. Knowledge of reading, writing, and communication. So for reading, I had to do a lot of scripting, writing good questions, rewrite a few people's words to make them sound a bit more eloquent and fluent at times, and a lot of precision and checking. Now this is a rundown, which you can't see that well, but don't worry, we will cover it again later, so let's just put a bookmark in that, because this is a very important part of the project that comes up a lot. Communication. I had to arrange interviews, meet with admin, recruit teachers, and organize volunteers. Now I'm not the best with communication, or I'm not the biggest fan of talking to people a lot, especially not formal emails. But I did have to overcome this for this project. For instance, these are all the different emails I have sent and received from Mr. Summers throughout this project. This is pretty much the bulk of the communication, and this was hard for me as someone who's not the best with formal emails or formality in general. So having this practice with communication was really a good experience for me. Next, into math. We all know math. You have pluses, minuses, multiplications, all that jazz. So I had to make sense of all types of problems and persevere in solving them. One big type of problem I had to understand is how to manage this large group. And I did this by making a simple formula and putting that into a not-so-simple spreadsheet. So here we have the spreadsheet, which you can see we have the students, the teachers, their classes, the total participants added up from this, and then how many materials we have available. Now, this would all update to, you can't see too well, but there's a giant green light there saying we are good to go. If another class adds, we have more than enough materials to supply that. If another class adds and say we don't have enough materials to supply another class after that, it'll go yellow saying, hey, you only have like 5 extra trash bags, so don't be adding anyone right now. And red, we need to get more materials immediately. This allowed me to make sense of this problem and go through and solving it. Next, reasons abstractly and quantitatively. Video time management. There is no good way to balance a video. There is no perfect equation. So I tried my best to create one. Because if there's something that I can do that thousands of filmmakers before me can't, why not try? So I started off by analyzing some past PSAs that have done well and figuring out how to best suit them to our community. So I started off with making it mostly interviews. As Mr. Summer pointed out to me, and as I've seen from talking to other students, one big important thing is getting that student voice heard, because people will take something better from a fellow student as compared to say a teacher telling them to pick up their trash. So we have this interview section from other students to talk to the students. We also have a classical intro to keep their attention, because if there's one thing many high school students don't do, it's pay attention for prolonged periods of time. So we have to catch their attention quick, do a call to action finally to end it off, and then end with some credits to thank everyone who helped me throughout the video process. And then I have to attend to precision. This is when we get the rundown again. So here you can see that I had to go through and make sure word by word everything was accurate. This is making sure that every single time it said Roud Park, I changed it to Rudd Park. This is making sure that, oh wait, they added an here, so I have to add an here. They paused here, so I have to make sure there's a comma. Going through and checking this pretty much character by character repeatedly to make sure I have it not only down to the frame, but down to the letter. This rundown was a heavily important thing to me, because I wanted to make sure this rundown was good, because this is what we needed to play in the announcements room to ensure that I had it like it would be for a professional news broadcast. I put a lot of time into this in making sure it was perfect. Finally, the traits that I chose: tenacity and reflection, because they're the ones that best suit the time and the most impactful for what I can fit. So I had to find something to do a lot of the time, because between waiting for interviews, waiting for trash pickups, waiting for the next piece of footage, I had to stall for time a lot to make sure I was keeping productive. One thing I did was get feedback on previous iterations. Here are 2 frames from my original draft. They might not seem that different from what you saw before, but if you look here, I changed them ever so slightly. This is what they actually look like. Be it moving a lower thirds to the other side or changing around words so they're more grammatically correct, I was willing to go through and put in the work to make sure that not only am I being thorough and putting in that extra time to ensure that we are working correctly and everything is the best it can be, but also I just wanted to ensure we had a good product to show in the future. So I would now like to conclude a bit with some of the things I've learned from this process. I learned that I should never run from change and not to be afraid to leave an idea if it isn't working. Like I said, I had other ideas before this, and if I would have stuck with, say for instance, the ukulele tutorials, I wouldn't have had this cool of a project, and I probably wouldn't be standing on this stage for you today. Because it would have just been something for me that I would have enjoyed but wouldn't have had that large of an impact. This is something that has a tangible result and can do better in the future. And the other thing I learned is pick up your trash, because if we have to keep organizing stuff like this, it'll never get better. So just pick up your trash, throw it away. There's absolutely no need to litter in these scenarios. And finally, this is an acknowledgements page. I'm going to leave this up while I finish talking. These are all the people who helped me with the presentation. This is just a fraction of the people who helped me here, because as I said, there was over 76 people in that trash pickup, as well as people who helped me film the video that weren't there. So the amount of people who went behind this is incredible, and I would just like to take a second to give them the acknowledgments they deserve and thank them. And I would like to thank you for judging.
Judges, questions to you.
David, what were your biggest challenges in this project?
The challenges, it was probably, like I brought up earlier, the finding something to do, because managing the trash pickup was an insanely hard task. Getting the video to be perfect was an insanely hard task, but the hardest task of it all was just finding something to do while waiting for that next step and keeping busy.
David, I'd like to know, What, what learning through all this process do you think will help you most in your next steps, whatever you're choosing to do after graduation?
So after graduation, I really like film and editing, so I fully intend to stick with this. And I think the trash pickup and working with different people as actors in my PSA will be the thing that sticks with me the most, because I work mostly by myself on majority of things. So working with other people and being forced out of my comfort zone in that way will probably stick with me a lot as I continue to work with more people in the future.
Thank you.
How did you convince others to help you in this process, and what was the motivation behind it?
So the way I convinced others was a pretty simple process. I went to teachers who I knew personally, so it'd be harder for them to say no. And then I asked nicely, hey, what is your second block? What are your plans? How would you like to not have to plan something for that second block? Or I went to teachers who had relevant classes that would be willing to do this sort of thing. And just by choosing and picking and choosing, which teachers I went and talked to, I was able to pave the road to get people to join a lot easier.
Do you feel like you've changed the mindset from littering to not?
I feel like I definitely did for a few people. I probably should have done a survey beforehand or some other things so I can get a quantifiable proof that I changed it, but I do believe there has been a slight shift. Because I just know talking to a lot of people who are in the trash pickup, they really enjoyed doing it and they had fun like being out there and doing good. And I'm hoping that that kind of spirit that they had during that day, they carry with them for a long time to keep either picking up trash or at least not littering themselves.
Thank you.
Can you speak to integrity and leadership?
Integrity and leadership. Certainly, let me pull it up. So for these I had to do, I'm actually really glad you brought this one up because it's one of my favorite ones. So again, there's a lot of time where I had downtime and had to make sure I was still working, and that was a big part of integrity for me. Making sure that I was still productive even when I didn't have something to be productive on. So I had to work independently, as well as trash pickup. That was a large amount of leadership for me that I'm not used to, leading this large group. Making sure the numbers were actually tracked correctly, and being an interviewer were both as well integrity and leadership traits. And yeah, so I just want to present this scrapbook to you. There's a lot of other artifacts I brought up, so just to prove this. Okay, never mind, I dropped the scrapbook, that's on me. But just picture those are the artifacts that you need to convince you of this point.
All right. Hello, my name is Eden Rhymes. I'm a senior here at CCHS. I'm about to talk to you about my capstone, which took me several months throughout the course of my junior year. I'd like to start with talking about the language of art and the fact that art is a language. And like language, it takes time and discipline to learn how to read it and think it. What you're seeing here is one of my art pieces that I made last year in AP Art and Design. Alright, now last year I was in AP Art and Design. This is a class that stretches both semesters throughout the course of the year. Our goal is to make 20 pieces surrounded by this one sustained investigation. This sustained investigation is supposed to be an open-ended question or thought-provoking idea or something like that. I came up with the idea of things that have irrevocable power over the physical, emotional, and spiritual form of man. These art pieces they were anything from the forces of nature to lies to self-judgment. If you look up there, there's an example of my big prized idea, which is called the they. That's the concept of having peer pressure from complete strangers, people who we don't know the identity of, and yet they have power, complete and total power over our mind and thoughts. My question is, how can I help both artists and non-artists get a better grasp on conceptual art and the thought behind deep symbolism? Before I go much further, I'll just like to say that at this time I was in the STEAM pathway. However, since then I have went on to several other corners of education. I have been involved in band and several district councils, and my future aspirations are mostly unknown, but I have a lot of interests, including biology and nursing and music. My consultant was the wonderful Christy Cushman. She was the art instructor of this AP Art and Design class. She has been an art instructor for 17 years and has a Master of Education in Art. All right, the summary is my capstone is compiled of two parts. The making of the art pieces, that stretches 90% of the project. The second part is a journal documenting every step of the way. Every single sketch, every single note. I have pictures of just like notes and notes of what does this mean, how can I portray this? Because really, at the end of the day, most of my art pieces just looked like an amalgamation of emotion and objects, and somebody who maybe is not quite tuned to the idea of symbolism in art. One might look at my art and go, I don't know what that means. That's what my journal was for. I was to give this to Ms. Cushman after my year was done, and she would give those to her future AP Art and Design students to give them a little more guidance on how they can get a 5 in their art portfolio. As you can see in my timeline, I started brainstorming ideas in August, and then throughout October to April, I was making art nights, days, during class, during other classes when I had spare times, breaks, weekends. I was making art. I was finished by April, and by then I compiled all of my documentation, put it in a journal, and organized it in a way that would make sense. My knowledge, I've received an A in my pre-search paper, which oddly enough was not for this. It was something very different, or not very different. It was for a illustrated nature journal, and at some point I made the switch. This slideshow is evidence of my knowledge, and I actually ended up earning an A in my AP examination, and written evidence in my art journal, because a lot of the journal pertains to writing. Oral evidence in this presentation. Throughout the explanation of my art critiques, every week we would have art critiques where we would sit down and somebody would show their art and go, this is my art, this is what it's about, go, critiques. And I would critique, make my purpose very clear, and then I would be the person to stand up and they would give me my critiques, and I would go, okay, I will do that, I will work on that. Or I would say, you know what, I don't quite see that, but I understand. My math is hard in art, but I was able to find some things. There is this rule called the rule of thirds, which is if you divide your art into triads, or thirds, when those sections cross, that makes for a very widely appealing focal point. Before I started any of my art pieces, I would measure out every single medium I had, whether it was canvas, or paper, or anything else. I would map it out, look at where those intersected, and go, that's my focal point. That's where people are going to want to look, and I'm going to play on that. As an addition, this math scale is all about the use of tools. My journal is just a tool to compile the information of what is essentially 18 pieces and 2 very detailed sketches. 6, this is a tends to precision. This is a concept called stippling, which is where you make a picture only made up of dots. You just go dots, 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 dots for hours. Darkness means that you must have bigger dots. So I would go and go, okay, this is a pen with 0.5 millimeters. This is going to go in the dark. This pen has 0.003 millimeter line. This goes in the forehead because I want my forehead to be illuminated. And then in between, I would figure out, okay, how am I going to get from the darkest to the lightest, and I would implement all of those different pens. I ended up using 4 different pens in just this part of the face. The third math is making sense of structure. This portfolio was everywhere. It went everywhere between blood, lies, impermanence, all these things. How was I going to compile this? I looked back and did some self-reflection, and I found 3 phases. The first phase are things that have very physical power over people. This is nature, this is fire, this is blood, very biological things. The second phase, the ambiguous, things like lies, truth, the impermanence of culture, things that can lead to further discussion. And the third phase, where I took my portfolio, was me. Things that had power over me. peer pressure, and fear, and just things that have like anxiety. These are things that have a control over me, and these ended up being in my we have a compilation of 5 of our best. We sent those to the judges, and all of the ones that I sent to the judges were in the 3rd phase. Innovation. A lot of this is just me deciding that I wanted to go further with this. I realized I had something even before I got my results back that I got a 5. I knew I had a formula, and I wanted to make sure I got it right and that I would document it. This documentation is very, very important because documentation is important in certain fields like nursing. Nursing, you have to be documenting all the time for legal reasons, and that is a field that I may or may not go into. Lesson learned. When you're doing something new and working at a fast pace, you gotta be flexible. It's important to account for everything that may or may not happen. I found my perfectionism starting to wear off as the year on. I strived for excellence, but in order to achieve excellence, I had to subtract my perfectionism. And I got there eventually. The call to action, mostly talking to other artists and future students of Ms. Cushman. Be transparent, and by capturing your own thoughts and feelings, you can speak to other people. And do not be afraid of putting in things that people will not get. That is the summary of my capstone. I hope you guys found it interesting.
Questions from the judges?
You had a lot of abstract ideas that seem to be driving your project. Do you have an idea of how you intend to use those in the future? Goals, career goals? How does this project relate to your future?
Yeah, so this was mostly about self-reflection and communicating with people in ways that are maybe counter to their media. Like I said, my future aspirations, mostly unknown, but this pertains to my love of communicating with people. People communicate in very different ways, and depending on where they grew up, how their brain works, certain things. Images can be very, very helpful to certain people, and art can be very, very encouraging for certain people who maybe aren't good at speaking or don't know how to communicate very well.
What would you say is the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself?
Okay. It's a good question. I found that my perfectionism, and honestly this isn't much of a surprise, but my perfectionism was the thing that held me back the absolute most. I wasn't, to be honest, I thought I was going to be afraid of like judgment, but I wasn't. It was my judgment. I actually have a piece about that, about judgment, and there are 3 objects, ones that represent self-judgment, peer judgment, and spiritual judgment. And I learned that judgment is a huge, huge part of it, but it was self-judgment that I found was the biggest antagonist in this whole process.
So then my follow-up question to that would be, how do you see that learning helping you as you move forward when you decide what you want to do?
This self-reflection was very good because I was able to compile ideas from my life. There's this other piece where I compile, it's a self-portrait, and I compile objects from my life that represent a much bigger story. Each of them, there were like 20 of them. This is about self-reflection, and I feel like self-reflection would be very important, but additionally, I did not have an infinite amount of time. I had to keep rolling, I had to keep going. There was this one piece that I hated it, but Ms. Cushman was like, just do it, just keep going with it. So I kept doing it, I looked at it, and I was like, okay, I guess it's done now, I gotta move on to the next one, and people ended up really liking it. So I found that I had to just keep going, and I couldn't plan on everything.
Thank you.
Do you feel like this gave you some clarity what your future looks like?
I learned that I probably like art even more than I did before, but there was a huge change when art became a passion and when it became an obligation. The thing is, specifically my junior year, when I was in this class, school and my home life were not separated. I brought my art home with me every day. I worked on it in school and outside of school, and I found out that at the time, I didn't compartmentalize very much. And in hindsight, I know that that paid off, but in the future, I know I have to do that and know when is work time, when is home time, when I need to rest.
The judges, we have time for one more question, if we could make it a trait
I'd like
and
to,
skill.
do you have one? Will you speak to agility and contribution?
Yeah. Contribution, let's see what I have here. I'm glad you asked about this one. Remember how I said that I did not start off with this idea for a capstone? Up until literally like 3/4 of the way through my junior year, my capstone was going to be an illustrated journal on ecosystems. Ecosystems, like we went on a road trip all the way up to California, and I would look at the elevation and then look outside and go, okay, these plants, this is how these ecosystems fit together. I had so many notes, but by the time I reached my junior year, I couldn't get it started. I didn't know where to start. I honestly didn't take that many science classes as much as I would have liked. So I made the switch around and was like, you know what? I really, really have a passion for this portfolio that I made. It is my pride and joy, and I want people to know what I did and how to do it again. And those are some pictures from what was going to be my graphic journal about nature.
In August 2021, my family received news about my older brother, Vince. That news was nothing good, as we found out he was diagnosed with Ewing's carcinoma, which is a rare bone cancer. We started a GoFundMe for him, and we had so much support from so many people, prompting me to want to give back. My capstone is Miles for Miracles. With that, my driving question was, how can I bring my community together to help support not only a foundation, but those fighting cancer? My name is Alyssa Merlino. I'm a senior here at CCHS. I enjoy outdoor activities and reading. I'm a part of the health pathway, and I'm the public relations leader in student council. After high school, I would like to pursue a career in nursing, and I have hopes in going to college to get my BS in. My professional consultant is Jamie Reed. Jamie Reed is a teacher, and she writes for the Daily Record. Jamie is very outgoing, and she does a lot for the school and community. I held a 2-mile walk and or run at the Riverwalk for the community to join, and I accepted donations from all those who wanted to participate. My goal was to raise enough money to give a sizable donation to the Orchard of Hope. In August 2021, a few days after my brother's diagnosis, it was when I came up with this capstone idea, and a little later I was finally set on doing a capstone or a fundraiser with my community. September 24th, I made sure to email the Orchard of Hope to let them know what I wanted to do for them, and I even called the rec district to get the okay to hold this at the Riverwalk. The week before, I made sure to reach out to my sponsors and gather all my materials that I needed, as well as making posters to spread the word. Here is a picture of my to-do list that I made. It has all the things that I needed to have done, as well as the things that I needed. And this is also a picture of the table that I had set up right before the fundraiser began. I had to use what I knew about the area of Canyon City to figure out a place to hold this fundraiser. I made calls to the rec district to get the okay to hold a fundraiser on the Riverwalk. The Orchard of Hope has always been a trusted foundation here in Canyon City, and they even helped donate to my brother. I made a professional email to reach out to Sandy Allen, who is in charge of this foundation, to make sure that my donation could be accepted. I even used social media to spread the word and to communicate with people. Here is the posters that I posted online, as well as putting up around the school. And then this is the email that I had sent to Sandy. And then this is another post that I made after the fundraiser, just kind of thanking those who came and supported. Math 1, make sense of problems to persevere in solving them. I persevered by finding local sponsors to address the problem of having money up front. I had to be aware of local events. I even had to change my original date due to there being a CrossFit competition, a run, and a bike race. I reached out to FAR to make sure my new date was good, and I even did research to find the best time and day to host a fundraiser. And I learned that in life you don't have to have all the answers, but you do need to know where to find them. With getting the word out, I found advertising on social media is very effective in reaching a larger audience. Math 5 uses appropriate tools strategically. I set up a jar for those to drop their donations in, and I collected it in an envelope at the end. I used a calculator many times throughout this to add the money after the fundraiser, and I ended with $1,700. Afterwards, money was still coming in, and I wanted to have a proper number, so I made a chart to keep track. Social media was a big tool in spreading the word about this fundraiser, and I learned that it is very important to use the proper channel for the targeted audience. Instagram is a big platform to reach younger audience, while Facebook reaches the older audience. Here is the chart that I had made. I kind of set it up of the cash and checks I received before the event, at the event, and after the event. In the end, I raised a total of $1,932. And here is the poster that I had posted on Instagram and Facebook. Math 6, attends to precision. Before the fundraiser, I walked the 2 miles myself while tracking my steps and distance on my watch, and I checked to see if it lined up with the Riverwalk's 2-mile mark because I wanted to make sure that I was precise, because I specifically said it was a 2-mile walk or run. I also had to be there early to set up so I could be ready to start at the exact time that I stated. Early is on time is late. I know that this is a life skill I can take with me. I want to be a nurse in the future. Someone will be relying on me, and nurses can't be late, just like I couldn't be late to my own fundraiser. My goal is to become a nurse, like I said. I'll need to be on time and ready every day. With this same drive, I knew I had to be the first at the Riverwalk, with this being on me alone. I had to make sure things were ready to go. I was so invested in this, it was something that was honoring my brother and others in my community, that when it was time to hand over the $1,932 check, I wanted to personally hand it over to board members Jerry Mead and Corey Simmons. From what I learned is I can feel empowered when I take the time to do things well, which will manifest in my future. Here is a picture of me handing over the check with Mr. Summers to the 2 board members. I answered my driving question by bringing my community together for a 2-mile walk or run to support a local foundation who supports those fighting cancer. From the challenges I faced, I learned that good things take time, and it's always good to have a backup plan and to stay open-minded. This capstone project connects with what I want to do after high school because I want to join a nursing program and I want to become a nurse. I want to continue to help all kinds of different people. I wish to urge all students to find a way to support our community through a service project. The issues, the lessons, and the experience that I took away from this are skills that I will take with me in the future endeavors. I want to give thanks to Jamie Reed, my sponsors, Jenny Jeff Reich, Hilo Custom Tees, Rochelle Cruz, the Orchard of Hope members, Rec District, and my family. All of their support helped me get through this, and I will forever be thankful for all of them. But I also want to give one last thank you to my brother Vince, who inspired this project, who is now living his best life cancer-free.
Oh, nice.
So thank you.
All right, questions from the judges?
So do you think you'll be an oncology nurse?
I have definitely thought about it.
Can you tell me how your project worked with civility and collaboration?
Yes. So because this fundraiser was also for a capstone presentation, I wanted to make it clear to those who participated that videos and pictures that were taken would be used for this. I made a couple of big signs so that participants could see that if they didn't want to be in any, they could come to me and tell me. When holding an event like this, the least that someone can do is honor its participants' wishes and beliefs. So that's how I showed that.
What do you think surprised you the most about yourself?
Just the fact that, because I was 16 when I did this, so the fact that I was able to bring so many people together and to raise the amount of money that I did, I was just so shocked that I was able to do something so big in a small town.
Awesome, thank you.
How did you reach out to the community to let them know about this project?
So I made posters, I can find the picture. But pretty much my mentor also helps posting, and so did my family members. So it was this yellow post that says Miles for Miracles. I put the date and time, and on another post I left a personal message from me, and I used social media was just a really big part of, getting out to people that I didn't know, because there were many people at this event, but then I also went and reached out to Mr. Summers so that I could put these posters around the school as well.
The average American household produces over 18 pounds of trash daily. This translates to over 6,000 pounds per year. So how can I fix this? How can I implement a new way to recycle our plastic waste? Well, I have implemented a recycling system called TerraCycle into the Canyon City Public Library and Lincoln Elementary to allow consumers of products to recycle their otherwise unrecycled materials, their plastic products and plastic product packaging, like Gillette razors, Colgate, oral care products, and more. There are several plastic packaging programs. My mentor is Carrie Trimble. She is an environmentalist and a retired teacher. She worked for 30 years as an environmental scientist, worked with USGS for some time, and worked as a Canyon City high school teacher for 27 years. So what is TerraCycle? TerraCycle partners with huge brands to minimize the hard-to-recycle waste like Rubbermaid Tupperware, beauty products like makeup and hair products, Febreze, and so many more. These free programs are sponsored by these huge companies to move towards a more efficient and cleaner earth. TerraCycle repurposes the plastic waste and creates shipping pallets, playground equipment, and many other items. My timeline begins in May, which is when I signed up for TerraCycle. In September, I met with the Lincoln principal, Mr. Olgame, and I got accepted to implement a recycling box into the Lincoln school. I set it up as a drop-off location. This is the TerraCycle website. Let's say I want to recycle Burt's Bees. It shows the location of the school as well as their hours and when you can drop off the specified materials. And on September 22nd, I got the box implemented. The picture on the right is when we were creating the box, and the picture on the left is what the box looks like inside of the school. On October 20th, I met with the library director, Suzanne Latasha, and I got accepted to implement another recycling box into the Canyon City Public Library. On December 10th, I got the box implemented. This is what it looks like. We also have flyers with the box on what can be recycled, as well as snacks and drinks that can be recycled with TerraCycle. For the programs that we are involved in, we are enrolled in 36 free recycling programs, and there are more that we can join all the time. Here are 4 of the big ones. The programs are very specific in what they accept. For example, Kroger, they only accept the flexible packaging from their brands, but it is all the different branches of Kroger. It also shows you what you can recycle with the program. There is also a Swiffer program, which only accepts the Swiffer pads with the TerraCycle program, but it shows you a recycle curbside tab and tells you the boxes that you can recycle with your curbside recycling. In Canyon City, our curbside recycling is Howard Disposal and Twin Enviro. There are also programs such as Colgate and Gillette, which recycle all of the products that they produce. For example, Kroger or Colgate, they accept all brands of oral care packaging and products. They accept all toothbrushes, all floss containers, etc. Same thing with Gillette, they accept all brands of razors. So what I do is I collect the trash, which is all contained in the boxes at the locations. I sort it out, and once I have a full shipment, I print off the free shipping label from their website, and I ship it off for free. For my knowledge, I wrote my research paper on recycling. I sent flyers out to the elementary school, which were handed to the students and eventually to their parents. And I've done extensive research and have recycled for years. For communication, I sent an email to Mr. Olgin, who is the principal of Lincoln, and he sent out my email on the newsletter, and it just kind of told parents what can be recycled with TerraCycle in their school, as well as communication with TerraCycle through calls and emails. My first math principle is Models with Math number 4. I made a graph on what we throw away. It is estimated that 28% of it is Amazon packaging, which is your packaging, which is your Amazon packaging, food packaging, etc. 18% of it non-durable, your single-use products, like plastic bags and straws. 20% of it is your durable, which is reusable products, donated products, or recyclable products. And 34% of it is compostable, which is your yard waste and your food waste. My second math principle is attends to precision number 6. I just brought it back to the specificity of each of the programs, and that it requires close attention to what goes in, as well as recycling in general with the specific plastics and cardboards that can be recycled. My third math principle is looks for and makes use of structure. I just used repeated reasoning with the creation of the boxes, as well as the communication with the places that I have the boxes. The trait that I chose is innovation and solution seeking. For innovation, I created the box out of all recycled materials. Nothing was actually purchased from any stores for the creation of these boxes. We used pictures from calendars in magazines, as well as just products that we have at our own house, as well as bringing in TerraCycle into Canyon City. It is an innovative way of recycling and getting rid of the waste that we put into the landfill. For solution seeking, I came up with my capstone idea and I found different ways to interpret the idea. I had 3 other ideas before this that had to do with recycling, but this was the most amazing one that I found. And an example of a problem would be that certain things are not recycled curbside, and the solution is TerraCycle to reduce the amount of waste that we put into the landfill and the oceans. My lessons that I learned are that community support is very important, which ties into marketing. Marketing is very important because with little to no or even bad marketing, it doesn't have the community on board with what you are creating or implementing. I also learned that there are many opportunities to make the world a better place, something as simple as collecting your household trash that you normally throw away and bringing it to the library. And research and being educated is very important when creating something new or implementing something. So what can you do? This is my call to action. You can compost, which is collecting things like your scraps from dinner, and it creates soil for your plants, and overall reducing and reusing. It is crucial to reduce the amount of waste that we produce. TerraCycle's goal is to rethink waste and, quote, move the world from a linear economy to a circular one. TerraCycle has recycled far over 7 billion items and counting. Thank you for listening.
Any questions?
Has TerraCycle offered you a job?
They have not. I don't think they have a headquarters in Colorado.
Well, they could have you start one.
Yeah, they should.
You could be in charge of marketing.
Yeah.
When did you start your project, and is it still in operation today? Are they still using it?
So I talked with the principal of Lincoln in September, and I put my box in the library in December, and it is still going.
So do you see yourself in the future becoming some type of environmental advocate or scientist or?
That would be really awesome. I'm trying to figure myself out, you know?
Oh, yeah?
I'm graduating with my Associates of General Studies.
Oh, nice,
So-
congratulations.
Thank you. I want to go to college, hopefully for maybe like science, environmental science or something like that, but you know.
What was the most challenging part of your capstone?
For me, the most challenging thing is just motivation in general. But the most challenging part of this specific project has been getting the community on board. My box at the library People are really confused on what the TerraCycle thing is, and that's why I have made flyers and stuff like that for people to take home. But they have been like using my hub as a normal recycling hub, which we can recycle with our curbside stuff in general, but just getting the community on board and understanding what TerraCycle actually does.
Piggybacking off of that, how did tenacity and reflection play a role in your project?
One second. For tenacity, I was really determined to do an idea of recycling. Like I said, I had 3 other recycling ideas before this. My first one was having Howard Disposal just come into Canyon City High School for just normal recycling because we only have paper recycling right now in the school. My second idea was to have a trash walk like on the Arkansas River Walk or something like that, and just educate the community about recycling and why they should do it. Finding a mentor was challenging for me because TerraCycle, like I said, they don't have a headquarters in Colorado, so I wouldn't be able to meet with somebody specifically with TerraCycle. And just creating new recycling options for Canyon City. And reflection, my idea how to make my capstone about recycling and to educate people about it. And the collaboration with the box locations, like talking to the library director, I got to meet with her and talk to her about the library and stuff like that.
You all have heard the classic excuse that my dog ate my homework. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. My dog Elle was a overall very crazy and hyper dog. Therefore, this led me to wanting to do my capstone project on dog training. And this led me to my driving question: how can I prepare my dogs for 4-H shows and teach others in my community about basic needs and training? Thank you all for coming to my capstone presentation. I'm Kayleen Ontiveros. I'm a high school senior. I'm involved in 4-H and HOSA. Some of my interests are the medical field, and I love animals. What I hope to achieve is doing dog training, attending a couple competitions, and teaching others about what I learned. My pathway is a health science, and I want to work as a vet, but right now I'm leaning towards more being a pediatrician. When I first started my capstone project, I needed a professional consultant, someone to guide me through it. So my professional consultant is Margie McNew. She has been a leader in 4-H and taught dog training for 25 years. She taught me obedience, showmanship, rally, general health, and anatomy. So what I did for my capstone project is I did weekly dog training practices for about 7 months. I then took what I learned from there and did the training at home. I did a total of 3 competitions, and I also taught my 4-H club on the basics of dog training and dog maintenance. I taught them about positive reinforcement, and I focused a lot on what I learned and how I could teach them on how to train their own dog. So for my timeline and process, in January through July, this is when I was working on actually training my dog. I did weekly meetings, I taught my 4-H club, and I attended competitions. And then August through December, this is when I was putting my capstone all together. I gathered and analyzed my information, I started my presentation slides, and I presented. For knowledge and communication, for memory and evidence, it was my research paper, my record books, which includes all the progress that Elle and I have done together, my score sheet, which is what judges graded me on during my competition. It showed what I did well at and what I needed to work more on. And then also my dog resource handbook. This includes all the information that Margie also taught me. For my communication, it is those weekly meetings and then teaching my 4-H club. For number 1, make sense. For my problem number 1, make sense of problems to persevere in solving them. So at the beginning of my capstone project, I had a lot of goals that I wanted to accomplish. I had project goals, personal goals, and service goals. So what I did with this is I identified my problems, came up with a couple of different solutions. I did trial and error, and also worked them out until they were solved. For number 3, constructs viable arguments and the critiques of the reasoning of others. So when I started my dog training project, I learned a lot about positive reinforcement and positive punishment. So positive reinforcement is the introduction of a desirable or pleasant stimulus after behavior, and positive punishment is any change that occurs after behavior that reduces the likelihood that that behavior will occur again in the future. So when I started dog training, my dog Elle, she is, as you remember, very hyper, wants attention all the time. And to get that attention, she used to jump up on me, but I was trying to teach her not to jump on me. So how I was teaching her is just kind of pushing her away so that she didn't jump on me, but she didn't really get the idea of what I was trying to tell her. So once I learned positive reinforcement, I immediately applied that to my training. So I tried a different method on how to train her and how not to jump. So what I did is I just crossed my arms, walked around trying to, when she jumped on me, giving her no attention. And then when she finally stopped and sat down, that's when I gave her the attention and all the praise that she wanted. And this taught her, oh, I don't get attention when I'm jumping on you, but I do when I'm sitting down. And this is my mathematical structure. I did a flow chart. For positive reinforcement, this shows better results. With training, reward-based training is better for animal welfare. It's good enrichment, and dogs get better at learning with rewards. And then positive punishment is there's potential risk to the dogs. It can cause them anxiety, increase the fear, and also make the dogs aggressive. So with my math number 4, models with mathematics. For this, I used a table to use mathematical principles and address my problems and organize my qualitative data to have a greater understanding of my problems. So as you can see from the table, this shows the progress from the beginning when we started training and then towards the end. So in January, when she was very hyper, very crazy, she was a lot in the needs to learn and does okay. And after those 7 months in July, she moved a lot towards does okay and does great. And then this also goes with the next slide. It shows our progress that we've done throughout those 7 months. So this first picture is our first competition that we attended. We got champion in showmanship. And then this next competition, the picture on the right, this is the Fremont County Fair. And we got grand champion and champion in dog showmanship. For innovation and solution seeking, how this applied to my capstone project is that certain commands didn't work. So what I did is I had to adapt how I approached things and created a better method and reflected on what works best. So when I was doing my training, when I was teaching her, I was very monotone, didn't have that great of body language, but what Margie taught me is that if you have a positive body language and a higher pitched tone of voice, your dog will respond a lot better with your training, and when you're excited, it makes your dog excited. So that made her excited for training. So what I learned is that you have to change your own behavior before you change your dog's behavior. And for reflection on this, I looked at how well does certain training go and what works best. For my application to the outside world, it's to think outside the box. And something that you hear a lot is, if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. But what I learned is that if what you try first doesn't work, to try a different method. Because if you're not changing what you're doing, you're not going to find a different outcome or solution. And then this is just evidence to that slide talking about your body language and your tone of voice. And this picture is me at one of the competitions applying it to my training. So for my lesson learned, I reflected a lot on traits, and I did a lot of reflection in agility. I learned that traits and skills are applied to an everyday basis. Some of my challenges were that I got stuck on what methods to use, and what I learned is to be open-minded and to communicate. For my connection, I learned that soft skills can be applied to my career, and traits and skills can be very useful. So what I want you to take away from my capstone project is that it is very important on how you communicate with your dogs. and communication with others and having an open mind, and also reflecting on your problems and not giving up on them and approaching them in different ways. Thank you for coming to my capstone project. I enjoyed sharing to you what I learned throughout it and showing you the progress of Eleanor.
Have you had any luck in the community chatting with them about training their dogs?
So have I had any luck in the community about training with my dogs?
Or training their dogs? Like
Oh,
for
training
instance-
their
Like for
dogs.
instance, you walk sometimes on the Riverwalk and there's well-trained dogs and there's not so well-trained dogs. Have you done any work with community members that they perhaps should entertain training their own dogs?
So one big part of my capstone project is teaching others what I learned through dog training. So I went to my 4-H club and I taught them everything that I knew and everything that I learned. And I showed them a lot of different methods like correcting your dog's behavior, how to walk them on a leash, grooming them, just the basics of training.
Nice, thank you.
Have you tried to quantify anything like numbers of hours, things like that, that went into training your dog at any point?
So have I tracked hours for my capstone project? I don't have the complete amount of hours, but I do have the start date and the end date, and we did it every week for about 2 to 3 hours. And then not only that, I also trained a lot at home on my own time.
Can you talk about agility and contribution?
Yes. So with agility and contribution, how this applied to my capstone project was overcoming problems at competitions. So what I did is I had to be flexible and adapt to different situations. So what happened at one of the competitions, we were outside at Red Park. There's many trees and also many squirrels. So a lot of the dogs were focusing on the squirrels and not the trainer, and it was very hard to get Elle to focus on me because this was my first competition. And when she noticed the squirrels, it was when I was doing my showmanship competition. So showmanship is how well you present your dog. So you have them on a lead, and there's this certain stance that your dog has. It's different for every dog. I have a golden retriever, and this is the stance that she was supposed to have. But since she was so focused on the dogs, it just gave her that perfect stance. She had her head held high up, and it worked out very well, and I was glad that I was able to be ready to be flexible. And so I just learned to be flexible at all times and to overcome challenges. And how this helped me and how I reflected on this is that adapting to new situations and coming up with different strategies on the spot can help me a lot in just anything, like a pop quiz or doing your training in competitions.
Thank you.
So, the title of my capstone is Discovering Canyon City, and I have a quote here that pretty much summarizes what my project is. The traveler sees what he sees, and the tourist sees what he has come to see, by Gilbert K. Chesterton. So, my driving question: how can I help tourists explore around our community and learn more about it in a unique way? But first, a little about myself. My name is Daniel Rodas once again. I plan to do mechanical technology after high school. And some of my hobbies include hanging out with friends and family, traveling, playing video games, and cooking. My professional consultant, also known as my mentor, was Lisa M. Studs, who works at the Royal Gorge Regional Museum, and that museum was a big help for this project and also a sponsor for a key part in my project. So, summary of my capstone was that I created this website that has a lot of information about dinosaurs, specifically the dinosaur statues that are surrounded all around Canyon City, like the ones you see in downtown. So this is basically this is the website I made where it shows all that information about Canyon City and the dinosaurs themselves. Now, later on in 2023, the website will be converted into a QR code, and then from the Royal Gorge Regional Museum, they're going to sponsor building plaques that the QR code will be inside, and then anyone, tourists, people who live in Canyon City all around, will be able to scan the QR code and then read the information that is in my website. And I think my capstone is pretty unique because this is going to be physically impacting our community, because this is forever going to be in Canyon City. And the purpose of this was to educate tourists. Many tourists come to Canyon City all the time, and they don't know much information about Canyon City or the dinosaur statues themselves. And not only tourists, but people who live here will learn more with this website. And that was the goal of this, to educate anyone who will scan the QR code. As for background information, I went in pretty blind. I knew nothing about dinosaurs or Canyon City, and after doing all my research, I ended up learning a little more. The timeline: February 15th, 2022, mentor. This is when I got a mentor. I emailed the museum asking for help, and Lisa offered to be my mentor. In April 29th, 2022, Capstone Fieldwork. This was when I started creating my website. I started researching, planning out a layout for the pages in the website. April 19th, 2022 was field trip. This was when my class and we went to the museum, and this helped me out a lot because I got a lot of information from this, and I also took some pictures I used for the website from the museum. October 11th, field work completed. This was when I was done with my website and I started creating a presentation for my capstone, which was one of the requirements. For communication, I have getting my mentor, help and suggestions from my mentor, and the field trip itself. Right here is a picture of all the emails I have with my mentor, which led to all the suggestions and help, the field trip. And a couple of times when I went to the museum to communicate with my teacher. As for reading and writing, I have written down, I wrote down all the different types of the dinosaurs, and my writing also comes from the research I did on every dinosaur. So here are all the dinosaurs and where the statues are located around Canyon City. I did all the research and I got the exact location of the statues. For Math 5, using tools strategically, I have an Excel worksheet that shows the type of dinosaur, what company owns the dinosaur, who painted it, the title of the dinosaur if it had one, and the exact location of the dinosaur statue themselves. I also used Wix to create my website, and also using Wix, there's a history tab that I use to help create my timeline, and with this history tab it shows you, right here it shows you all the times you logged into the website to make changes. So with that, it helped me see exactly when I started and when I stopped for my timeline. And once again, I have docs, which I use for my research. For Math 6, Attention to Precision, I have different website drafts. The original home page is now the last page, and I created a brand new introduction page. One of the times when I went to go see Lisa, she gave me the idea to make an introduction page, which is right here labeled Introduction, which better explains Capstone and why I created the website to begin with. And now this picture right here on the left, Discovering Canyon City, is now the ending slide, which I think now is a better ending than it was an introduction. Thanks for my mentor. And it's very important to be precise because I needed accurate information about these dinosaurs. I couldn't just put false information into our community. So because of that, Melissa got a professional to read through my website. And then after that, I went through all the edits. I also included stuff to make sure that the website was completely accurate so it wouldn't be false information. For Math 7 looks for a mixed use of structure. The structure of the website. Every page on the website has the exact same layout. There's continued patterns, and I made it very simple to read and to understand. As shown here, you have an example of the page is you have the title of the dinosaur, followed by a paragraph about explaining the statue itself. Under that, in the middle, we have a paragraph and a picture of the dinosaur, a little brief history about the dinosaur. Then some facts about the fossil of the dinosaur, there's a paragraph about that. And on the bottom, we have sources and quick facts that are just very quick facts about the dinosaur. For civility, I have civil language on the website. I highlighted why I found the most interesting facts and I rewrote it to avoid plagiarism. And I was also very civil with my mentor. Whenever I discussed with her, we went through ideas. Right here in the middle is a picture of the permission slip I had to make so we can go to the museum. And on the right, I have a picture of notes I took, which were ideas and suggestions, which is the collaboration I had with my mentor, where we shared all that. Lessons learned. So, what did I learn? The summary of what I did, because I now am more organized and I'm a little more better when it comes to research because of this capstone project. I like highlight more now rather than just throwing everything on the dock, and I organize everything a little more because of this project. And once again, my driving question is, how can I help tourists explore around our community and learn more about it in a unique way? And to answer that is by creating a website that will be converted into a QR code that will be inside a plaque next to the dinosaur statue. And then anyone all around Canyon City will be able to scan that code and start learning more and reading more with my website. For my call to action, learn more with my website. Right now, you can feel free to scan the QR code on screen where you can read through my website and start learning more about dinosaurs in Canyon City. Thank you.
Will your website have a map for finding each of these dinosaurs?
It will not, but there is a map online from the Royal George Regional Museum. There's a map that shows all the different dinosaur statues, and that could be something that I could include with the website before it is in the plaques around Canyon City.
Maybe a link to that or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
What was the most difficult thing about your project?
The most difficult thing was the accurate information, because I was always changing stuff around. I researched a lot to make sure the information I had was accurate, and even then when I presented it, basically the final product to my mentor, there were still some things I had to change. So it was kind of difficult going back and forth, changing things around, and to try and get into the time frame, which was December 16th at the time. So yeah, that was about the most difficult thing.
Tell me how integrity and leadership played a role in your capstone project.
Okay. So for integrity and leadership, I worked in and out of the school, because during this was, it was early on 2022, like April and May was when I was working on this, and I would almost always email my mentor during school hours, but then summer came and I didn't want to wait 3 months doing nothing, so I went ahead and emailed her myself outside of school. And most of the time was when I was meeting her was during the summer, and that's when I made a lot of the changes. So when I came back in August, I had very little things to change, so then I could start working on my presentation. And for leadership, I am leading the community, because once again, everyone's going to be able to learn when the plaques eventually get made, because everyone's just going to be able to scan the QR code around the dinosaur statues in Canyon City and start learning more about Canyon City itself and the dinosaurs.
What's your favorite dinosaur statue?
I like the T-Rex one.
Yeah.
I know, I'm not sure if I had it on here. I
Where?
don't think I had it. Oh,
Where
I
is
can
that
show
one?
you on the website. Yeah, this was my favorite picture. This is one that I took while I was making all the changes.
Nice. Thank you.
So if I can clarify, there will be some plaque next to each dinosaur?
Yeah, the idea is to like have like some kind of like protective plastic and make it see-through for the QR code so everyone can scan it, and it also wouldn't be damaging the QR code easily, because one of the ideas was to just like tape it on there, but anyone would be able to just rip that off, so the plaque would be more secure so that it just stays there forever.
So my question is if you considered going to the city and asking them if they could put up some kind of permanent sign?
Yes, that's what the Royal Gorge Regional Museum was going to help with. Lisa informed me that that was the idea, to get money from the city council to even make the QR code to begin with, or the plaque. That was she told me that in 2022, so the timing wasn't right there. So this year will be when the plaques will be made, because they will be receiving a grant.
Well, I hope you go and present to the city council
Yeah.
your idea, because it's great.
So, hi, I'm Eliana,
Hi, I'm Nate,
and this is our capstone project, Helping Hands.
and our driving question is, how can our baskets help those in need?
First, we'd like to start by introducing ourselves. I'm Eliana, I love to bake, I'm in thespians, I take Pro Start courses through the high school, and after high school I want to go to culinary school and open my own bakery.
Hello, I am Nate. I love to help people, and I'm aspiring to be a veterinary technician, and I come from a background of poverty.
This is our mentor, Miss Weber. She teaches Pro Start courses through the high school, which I'm taking, which was able to help us in our project, and she's a great mentor.
Caring Jen. We also worked with our youth group leader, Jen. She gave us access to her commercial kitchen, working out the church, and we used the church to safely hand out our baskets.
Did you know 811 million people go to bed every night without food? That's why in this project our goal is to lower that number. So we gave 4 families enough food for 7 whole days, and we also provided them with a recipe book with purchasing information and how to make the recipes and with menus.
The process of completing our capstone project. In order to do this project successfully, we had to make a GoFundMe page to raise enough money. We also hung flyers containing our information around the town, and we were very grateful to get a free advertisement in the Daily Shopper. Isn't that amazing? Then once we received all donations, we made baskets and gave them to our wonderful families.
And here's a little summary of our capstone. We raised money to give food to people in need. We found the people we wanted to give the baskets to and people who would like to receive them. We made a shopping list of everything they were going to need to make their menus and food. We gave the baskets to people in need, and as you can see, this is a little quote we got from someone, and she was just thanking us for all the food we were able to give her and the beautiful flowers, and she said her little son was most happy, and that just really touched our hearts.
This is our Knowledge ELA. For Knowledge ELA, we both wrote a pre-search paper our sophomore year. We reached out to the Daily Shopper via email and were able to get a free advertisement of our flyer.
We were also able to advertise on social media and Facebook. We had to write our own recipe books, and in the recipe books we included how to make the meals, and we also included what we learned from this capstone and how it was significant to us. And we communicated with the families and figured out how many people they need and how much people we were going to be able to feed with what they had. And on this slide you can see our recipe books and our advertisement, which are actually in the folder we were able to give you if you want to take a look at that.
Math Trait 1, making sense of all types of problems. We were given a very tight budget, limiting how we can make the meals and how many we could hand out. Our goal was $1,000, but unfortunately, we received a little under $300. But from that tight budget, we learned how to shop wisely and budget smartly.
Math trait number 5, using appropriate tools strategically. We used a calculator to calculate how much it costs to buy everything. We then went on the Walmart website to pick and choose what was going to be better for our money, so we went for the cheaper alternatives, which is actually something I learned in Miss Weber's class, so it was really cool to get to use it in my capstone project.
Math trait number 6, attends to precision. Food prices have gotten higher over the years, as many of you probably know, so we cut down costs by buying store-branded items. We also compared cheaper items and how much more we could buy, and from this, we could be precise in the fact we had roughly $75 to spend on each of the 4 families for 7 full days.
Next is our top trait, and we chose agility because we actually experienced a lot more setbacks than we originally planned. For example, the weekend we originally wanted to hand out our baskets, Nate was sick and I was participating in the school fall play. So we had to reach out to Jen and let her know the original idea we had of a bake sale was just not going to happen with time limitation. And then after that, the weekend we were actually handing out the baskets, Jen was leaving for a week and we were using her church, so we reached out to someone and were able to get someone to watch us to be safe.
How to adapt. We learned even with the setback, we still were to hand out a wonderful amount of food and have a good turnout. We had to have another person watch us during the process of handing our baskets for safety reasons and to follow the school compliance.
So to apply this, we learned setbacks actually happen often. And at first we were frustrated, but being frustrated wasn't getting us anywhere. And if we wanted to have a good turnout, we had to get past the frustration, and we learned frustration isn't good, and we still had an amazing turnout even with our setbacks. So for our call to action, we learned if you need help to always reach out for help, and if you can help someone, do it. And our capstone only shows one way you can do this in our community because there are so many other ways. And you can also see our food baskets and the significant amount of food we were able to give each of these families.
Our learning experiences include how to properly use money and budget,
We learned how to make menus and with a product.
and how to communicate with people and make the best of every single situation.
And we'd just like to thank you all for your time, and if you have any questions, we'd be very happy to answer them.
Did y'all quantify the average cost per meal for the recipes that you put together?
No, but we did spend $75 for each family for the 7 whole days. So for each meal, we would get cans and they'd be like 80 cents. So I'd say probably $13 per meal and the families had kids and parents too. So it was a pretty good group of people we were having to feed.
How was it working together?
It was sometimes we would get a little frustrating, but it was nice to get to work with someone else and understand each other.
How was your communication with each other?
I think their communication was really good. We have great chemistry, and so we like to agree on a lot of things. If we don't agree, we learn to adapt, and we learn to move forward in that subject. And yeah, even if we had setbacks, we come together, we discuss it, and we move on.
Yeah.
Good.
If you guys would have had more time and resources, how could you have gathered more money?
If we had more time, since we were limited, we were hoping to get out there more and be able to advertise it more, through the school more. Because at first we were skeptical about doing it through the school because we didn't want kids to feel embarrassed or something if they wanted a food basket, because that's actually something that can be pretty embarrassing. But if we had more time, we would have put it out on social media more, we would have gone out more in the community and done more things. But with limited time, we just stuck to what we did.
Can you speak to tenacity and reflection?
Yes, of course. All right, so I'll do the first two. Okay, so we didn't reach our goal. We set out with a goal of $1,000 and made a little under 300. We were not able to feed as many families as we had hoped to feed. We had to come with the ideas to fix this. We originally thought of making it 5 days instead of 7 and having the big sale, but we realized if we did it 5 days instead of 7, that wouldn't have pursued what we wanted. Because a week is 7 days, not 5 days, and that would just be unfair to our families to only be fed for 5 days when we had said 7.
And it's hard to raise money, and we learned hard to raise money, and lots of people are unsure of giving kids money, right? Because, we're in high school, and they don't know what we're going to do with it. And we learned how to eat really cheap, and we were able to create amazing meals for each of the families, and we learned how to shop and make a budget, and so we can stay in the range of what we wanted to while still be able to get the meals we wanted to each of our families.
And to add to that, we actually ended up having extra money after all of our budgeting. So we got each of our families a bouquet of flowers just to make them feel warm in the hearts because it was the week of Thanksgiving. And we applied this because we learned that if we ever run into a problem in the real world where money's just really tight, you can make the best of it and be able to buy cheap alternatives. And it taught us how expensive food is, and will teach us how to probably spend the money in our future, and we learned how to use the money, and also made me appreciate my mom a little more for how she spends her money with the food.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right, guys. So my name's Aiden Massey, and I did my project on bodybuilding, right? And my whole goal here was to use my own weight loss journey to teach others and help them reach their fitness goals. So I wanted to start off here with a quote from Batman, because I figured, what gets a lot of young men into fitness is the movie stars on the screen, like Superman, Aquaman, Batman, just because they're really big, And I would love to look like that someday. So I figured I'd go ahead and start with what got me into it. So the whole goal is to teach a class about the basics of bodybuilding using my experience, and the reason why is just to help people reach their fitness goals. So my pathway was STEAM, and how I included science in this is I used a bunch of different papers, but mainly meta-analysis. That sounds like the plural, but basically what those things are is a compilation of a bunch of different papers, right, talking about the same subject, and then you'll be able to mark the trends from those. I'll mention those whenever we get to them later in the presentation. So my mentor was Ryan Hardy. I chose him because he was a registered nurse. He's a certified CrossFit trainer, and he has an interest in understanding for the more scientific aspects of fitness. So I figured he would be the perfect fit for that sort of thing. So here's my timeline. Apparently only one picture loaded. All right, so a little embarrassing for me, but my first photo up there was taken November 29th, 2021. That's when I wanted to start my whole weight loss journey thing, right? That's around 24% body fat. And then I started my actual teaching aid rough draft around August 21st, 2022. And then my leanest progress photo, September 4th. Found my actual mentor September 24th, and then I finalized my teaching aid with his help November 5th, 2022. And so those slides are just before and after. I talk about maintenance calories and how to figure out your body fat percentage from home in my rough draft, and then with his help, I went in more depth with things like steroids and how much protein is too much. And then in November 29th, I actually taught the class. All right, so for my knowledge ELA, orally, I had to organize the class with Miss Lambert. She's a weightlifting teacher here, and I actually taught it here at the high school. And then organizing time to receive advice from my mentor to fortify my teaching aid. Written, I had to write a letter to my mentor and our pre-search paper we have to do. So, okay, yeah. These are just some up-close pictures of me teaching the class, and then there's my transformation timeline over the course of, I believe, 7 months-ish. So 24% to around 12.7. And then as you can see, the longer the more I picked up with it, the more often I would take photos. And so there's a little section down here that says more than 10 photos, right? And then here's a little of my teaching aid. So talk about things like how to figure out your maintenance calories with maintenance calorie calculator. I talk about how to figure out your body fat percentage from home, a few different types, and their effectiveness. I talk about basal metabolic rate. I talk about cutting. Here's an example of a meta-analysis I used from the Human Journal, or Human Kinetics journals. And this is basically just talking about lean body mass change, right? in correlation to grams of protein per kilograms of protein taken per day, right? And so I use this to make an optimal range for recommending those who are wanting to go in a cutting phase. And so I even converted it to pounds, so that way people would be, more familiar with it since we're in the States. And then I go into bulking. I do the same thing, meta-analysis, and then I make a range from around 1.6 to 2.4, just so there's some more backing behind this. I also I used Jeff Netford. He's a professional natural bodybuilder for like 12 years, and he was, I took most of my information from him. I just went a little bit more in depth. Then I talked about body recomposition, and with that main gaining, how to figure out optimal protein for main gaining, and then calculating macronutrients. So for my first math trait, I chose math trait number 3, construct viable arguments and critique reasonings of others. So for constructing viable arguments, I'm waiting for it to load. I mentioned before that I used different scientific papers to support my conclusions and took a look at different studies to create the protein ranges that I wanted to recommend, because I didn't want to be, unfactually based. And then Mayo Clinic. So what happened with them is I was really confused because they're a good source, right? And I found that their information conflicted with mine. And so I dug a little bit deeper, and they had a protein range that was pretty low, right? And so what I did was I looked a little bit more in depth, and I realized that they were looking at non-resistance training individuals. So that kind of changes everything, whether you're looking to gain mass or keep mass versus just survive. So for my second math trait, I chose math trait number 5, use appropriate tools strategically. And throughout my presentation, I used multiple graphs throughout the teaching aid, and then using calculator to convert grams per kilogram for protein or to grams to pound for protein. For my math trait number 5, extended, I just basically go into how I make my own routine, like calculating my maintenance calories, what I use for protein goals. I usually find that like 1 gram per pound of body weight fits within a cut in a bulk, so I kind of just generally recommend that or whatever you want. How I structure each of my meals. So I'll usually make a meal with a protein, a starch carb, and a fibrous carb. What that means is basically you just need a protein source. A starch could be anything like bread, rice, potatoes, so on and so forth, and then fibrous is just vegetable, right? And then the ratios do matter for your goals, but not very much. I'm also vegan, so these are some vitamin deficiencies I have to watch out for. And to the side of those, you'll see how I combat those with nutritional yeast, plant milks for vitamin B12, omega-3 fatty acids, nuts and seeds, zinc, beans, and iron, leafy greens. All right, so I skipped my... All right, so third math trait number 7, looks where it makes use of structure. So basically what I did here was finding a solution to muscle mass loss during a cut, right? And so what you can do there is you can do either whenever you're cutting your calories, right, it's important that you eat more protein than you would on a bulk, because if you eat the same amount on a bulk, you're sufficiently nourished on a bulk versus a cut. So a cut, your body is more likely to draw from fat stores and muscle stores, but if you supplement with more protein, the risk of losing muscle mass is less. And then just developing my fitness routine over time. Oh gosh. All right, so for my first trait, the trait I chose innovation and solution seeking. What I did for innovation was learning about diet and nutrition to construct my own diet, as well as learning how to make a training schedule based on my research. For solution seeking, asking specific questions about how many grams of protein should I eat during the cut, and then the discovery of different methods for achieving 2 goals simultaneously. These are things such as a body recomposition or main gaining. What I learned is that through understanding, I can learn how to achieve my goals. Okay, lessons learned. So I learned that tenacity, knowledge, and consistency are important. Tenacity helps you persist through no matter what. which is, you'll face tenacity a lot whenever you're trying to lose weight. Knowledge, if you gain more knowledge about a subject, it makes it easier to accomplish, and consistency is very important, especially with things like weight loss or weight gain. Call to action. After all the things I've learned in the small training of my mind, I've come to realize that everybody is capable of change. If they want, all should try to change for the better. Just be consistent, don't make things too hard, learn about the subject through research, and claim your passions.
What are your career aspirations?
So as of right now, I really want to be a therapist because I feel like there's a big need for mental health, professionals. Just like in the small town of Canyon City, I know a lot of people who need therapists and they have a hard time finding them, so I figured that'd be a good job for me.
So you talked about people can change. Could you apply some of what you learned about that to being a therapist?
I'd say from this experience, something I've learned is that my confidence has gone up a lot, and I feel like all around I just feel better about myself. And so I feel like wellness is physical and mental, and so I definitely feel like, they cross over.
You mentioned you taught this to a class, a high school class?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How many students were there?
There was around, I want to say, 12 students-ish, and they had a hard time grasping everything, because I went pretty in depth, and maybe that was something I could have done better, just to,
How did you approach integrity and leadership?
Integrity and leadership. Sick. Alright, so demonstrated integrity through admitting my faults to the audience while I was teaching. So I had a study that had limited information in it, and I thought about including it, right? But one of the things I learned is that, so with a study, you have an abstract which basically tells you a general overview of what the study's about, right? But I didn't actually have access to the rest of the study, so it gave me the conclusion, but without looking at the process of it, you can't exactly do that. And so I found this error looking back through my stuff, and so I wanted to tell the audience that there is, it's hard to find the right information, even whenever you're looking into the more scientific aspects of learning and stuff. For leadership, just leading others to be the best version of themselves by giving them the information they would need to achieve their goals.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What was your biggest challenge?
I'd say, honestly, probably just losing weight, because it's hard, and I feel like everybody knows that, but I feel like just taking the time to learn definitely helped, because whenever you start, there's another slide that talks about tenacity, but whenever you start, you won't see much progress in the beginning. For the first 2 months, I maybe lost 3 pounds, something like that. And so as I gained more information about it, then I gained more confidence to stay consistent, right? And so I'd say just staying consistent is probably the hardest thing.
Thanks.
Hello everyone, and welcome to my capstone presentation. My project was to write a novel that includes a wider audience than most of today's literature. You might ask, how does this help our community as a whole? How is storytelling powerful in the greater scheme of things? Well, stories have always had an important place in our world. They teach us, they comfort us, they entertain us, and they shape our views. However, much of what we consume stays within a certain comfort zone, one that fails to include identities that aren't cishet and white. Most of the time, youth's major values and needs fail to be represented. Teens go to stories to learn our most important lessons, and it becomes a problem when we find no answers. Now more than ever, diversity is a part of us. If the world is no longer affected by stories, and the world is shaped by stories, where does that leave us? And now you might be wondering, who am I to make these claims? To start, my name is Emma. I have a passion for activism, which I direct into social extracurriculars and associations. I am also deeply rooted in liberal arts and aspire to combine the two into a career as a journalist and author. My mentor is named T.C. Tolbert, writer, teacher, and poet laureate of Tucson. He has many other achievements as well and has been an immense help during this project. Yes, the project itself. I sought to use a fantasy setting to explore the young adult experience in a complex world. I used poetry and allegories to do this. As you can see here. As for the story, it follows two teen girls in the 1990s as they stumble onto a portal and end up trapped in the world of Fae. They discover they have powers and lead a resistance effort against the Fae's authoritarian leader. While doing this, they also grapple with their own identities and struggles and learn from the new world and its inhabitants. To write this story, I had to follow a timeline. I started with planning, research, and design, then began the real writing process. Finally, I edited and went over my work until it was as close to perfect as possible, given the time constraints. Throughout this timeline, I acquired an understanding of these many steps, and at the same time, learned more about the world and myself. I communicated with peers and my mentor to get insight on their experiences. Then I applied these experiences and struggles to a story format. More than creating a world, I spoke on it, on its importance and on its connection to the audience. Here are some of the artifacts from my book, including the novel itself and some past drafts I had done of it. For my first math skill, I have constructed an argument for the importance of diversity in literature and illustrated this with statistics about the lack of representation. In the CCBC's survey of incoming YA books, they discovered that a vast majority of books had a white lead. Similarly, only a very small percentage of books had an LGBT main character, and of those, many communities were still not represented. So the statistic you see on the right is only 3.68% of all books, and these statistics are within that percentage. In the world, many teens struggle with depression and instability. These topics can be discussed but aren't always properly represented. It isn't enough to cover these topics. They need to be represented in a way that attends to precision. My novel deals with sensitive topics and frequently misrepresented identities. Many times, these identities are shown as stereotypes and their struggles are romanticized. Here are some examples of these identities and some examples of how they are dealt with in story context. Unfortunately, they are often represented in media. Having observed this, I sought to have a diverse and well-represented cast of characters. Here are the intersectional identities of my main characters. For my final math skill, I used a fundamental element for writing a book, structure. I shaped each element of the plot and made sure it fit with the overall story. Where there was a plot or error, I fixed it. On to traits. Throughout this project, I learned to illustrate the world in an innovative and upstanding fashion as a best-selling author would. I sought solutions for real-world problems by working through them in a fictional context, and for writing-related issues by learning techniques, and when it came down to it, just buckling down and writing the darn novel. Here's another excerpt that works through a real-world issue. Being civil and thorough in my representation of others meant consulting them. I talked with others about their experiences and their feelings of my novel. The goal was to present holistic, honest commentary, rather than the glorified and all-knowing version that authors often present. I acknowledge that I will never know everything, and will sometimes be wrong. However, this doesn't mean I can't try. I need to learn all that I can and do my best to be right. Lessons such as these are a core part of my project. It held true to its status as a school project and really taught me, as school should. Overall, I came to understand more about the many intersectional identities in my novel and how to successfully write about them. This was my first gift to the readers of tomorrow. What will be yours? To start, you can give your approval. To your children, your loved ones, and their identities, but more specifically to this project, to the up-and-coming diversity of the book industry. Buy and read books from queer, neurodivergent, and POC authors. This will show publishers that diversity will be well received. Plus, you just might learn something. As this project and this presentation come to a close, I would like to give thanks to you for listening, to my many teachers and helpers, to the souls that inspired my characters, and to the souls I hope to inspire. Thank you.
Questions?
Would you tell us a little more about your mentor? I didn't quite catch all that. How you found your mentor and communicated?
Huh?
How you found your mentor and then communicated with your mentor?
I've come from a family and community that's involved in a lot of activism, and that means that I know a lot of poets and writers, and one of them who I've known for a long time is TC. Throughout my young years, he's read a lot of my books and writings, and we've talked about them. I think he's a really good person to discuss these identities with. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a two-part question. Did you complete the novel?
Yes. I think I originally aspired to write a lot longer of a story, but things have a way of being simpler and less straightforward perfect than we think they are. I do hope to eventually write more, whether that be during college or after, but for now the story has come to a close.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So what about the editing and rewriting process, which is like most of it?
Oh yeah, it was a long one. It wasn't entirely writing the book, and then editing, it was kind of something that I did throughout the process. Like, I would be knowing that I needed to write and then just start changing things. And I think I've heard of writers spending their entire lives on a book, even after publishing it, and part of me could be like that, but I knew that if I wanted it to make a change, it wouldn't need to be as much perfect as out there. Mm-hmm.
Have you moved forward with publishing it?
I haven't yet, but I definitely plan to.
Can you speak to your use of agility and contribution, please?
Agility and controversion?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think that I definitely represent some of these identities, but not all of them, and everyone makes mistakes, like I said in my novel, but the goal is to fix these mistakes instead of overlooking them. Like a few times in my novel, I found something that I realized was very controversial and poorly represented. An example of this is representing my main trans character. I think a lot of times in books, the character is put through a lot of stuff just to show how hard people's lives can be, but it's more for the benefit of the audience in a way that really tortures the character. So I wanted to represent his struggles in a way that showed them, but also showed him moving past them and living a better life. But I think sometimes authors think their way is the right way because they are the creators, the gods of the universe, and no one is perfect, but you have to acknowledge that you aren't.
I'm just curious, how was this helpful in you learning about yourself?
Sorry.
How was this process helpful in you learning more about yourself?
I think it definitely proved to me that I could write a book if I wanted to. I've been my whole life kind of been writing stories about these characters in this universe, but being able to just write a whole book before I turn 18 is pretty empowering. And there are definitely pieces of me in every character, whether it be some of the feelings the main characters have for each other, or some of the questions about self. Like, sometimes I think I struggle with thinking I'm too much, as does the main character. And I think overall, I used to really want to escape to a different fairy world. I was kind of obsessed with it, and I realized that no world is perfect, and instead of escaping into another one, I can choose to use that one to help this one.
Interesting, thank you.
Yeah.
Web design, 4th block, 2nd semester. What does that have to do with literally anything? Well, that has to do with the fact that that's when I met one of the most inspirational people in my life, Mr. Ben Newman. We'll get back to him later, though. This is my capstone. Business in Chicago. My trip to FBLA's National Leadership Conference. And my driving question is, how can I use business techniques and skills in order to raise money for the FBLA National Leadership Conference? Let's get to know me a little bit. I'm an FBLA. I'm also in PTech CS pathway, and I'm currently working at PCC in order to get my degree in web design. When I first started this project, I really wanted to create better websites for companies. And because I wanted to do this, I was able to get a really big skill set. And now I'm currently working on commission for a nonprofit organization to make them a website. But throughout this entire project, I learned that I love working with people. I love working with students. So I ended up wanting to become a teacher now, specifically business and technology, like my inspiration, Mr. Newman. Speaking of Mr. Newman, here he is. He has a master's in education as well as a master's in business. As well as this, he's the FBLA advisor, making it so if I had literally any questions about anything, I was able to go to him. He was able to give me a really good response, an answer that really helped me out. So everything for me started on January 13th, 2020, when I walked into web design for the very first time. Well, that's where I met Mr. Newman, of course. And during that, he encouraged me to join FBLA, in which I did the following year on August 18th. A few months later in December, I took the word processing test for the very first time. This test consists of two parts, a written portion as well as an actual quiz-like portion. During the written portion, I had to show I knew how to use Microsoft Word. And during the quiz portion, I had to answer questions about Microsoft Word, about English, like proper English and writing and whatnot. On February 9th, 2022, I won third at our district leadership conference. After that, I took the competitive test for the second time. And then in April, I ended up winning first in word processing in the entire state of Colorado. So, because of this, I was able to get the chance to qualify for nationals. And I'm the first person in Canyon City history to go to the FBLA National Leadership Conference. So, that means April 30th through May 4th, we planned fundraisers, because as you might expect, the National Leadership Conference was in fact expensive. May 5th, I ended up creating a cost list for some cookies, because we wanted to do a bake sale, Senior Fun Fest, in order to raise more money. The next day, we created the cost list for the actual conference itself. About a week later, we ended up getting the entire trip sponsored by the Saturdays as well as Techstars. But because they covered everything, that does not include they covered souvenirs. That's why we still sold the cookies at FunFest. That way I could have money for souvenirs, because what's a trip without having something to remember about? So, about a month or two later, I arrived in Chicago on June 28th. Then, a few days later, I took the competitive test for the third time. I thought, wow, that test was a lot different than before. And the next day, I attended closing ceremonies where I found out I didn't place. But that really taught me a really valuable lesson this entire trip did. Is that it's not about placing. It's about getting to experience a new world outside of Canyon City. Because while I may have traveled around the state due to certain circumstances, I never was able to leave the state like this. I was never able to experience a different culture like this one. It really taught me a lot about what the rest of the world is like. And about experiencing new culture, I was able to see a Broadway musical called My Fair Lady, which to this day is still one of my favorites. After I saw My Fair Lady, the next day we returned home. Here are a few of my English artifacts. The first two I'd like to talk about are my two thank you letters. One to Mr. Newman and one to the Saturdays and Techstars. The first one to Mr. Newman was a lot more personal and informal because I knew him. I knew a lot of inside jokes we could talk about and something that would make it a lot more personal. Well, as you can see here for the Techstars letter, it's a lot more formal because I didn't know them personally. I had to thank them in a way that was a lot more professional. Because they were an official business, I couldn't be like, hey guys, what's up? Thanks a lot, bye. So the next thing I'll talk about is math principle number 4, models of mathematics, in which I used the cookie sheet that I mentioned earlier in my timeline. So for this, as you can see, I had 3 different types of cookies that I wanted to make. In each of them, of course, we need ingredients. So, for example, we have flour there. 2.5 cups of flour with sugar, 5 cups of chocolate chip, and 3 cups of peanut butter, ending up about 10.5 cups. Then to the side, as you can see, the ingredients, we had flour. So how much would go into 10.5 cups of flour? Well, that's just one purchase of a bag of flour. And we do that for each ingredient you see here for our estimated total of $61. Now, this ended up being right, which taught me a very life skill. Just because something says it's like that does not mean it's going to be like that. So our true total ended up being about $91, in which that's also proven again here with this receipt. My next math principle I'll talk about is math principle number 5. Uses appropriate tools strategically. Now, this one I think I'd cover Microsoft Word, because where would I be right now if it weren't for Microsoft Word? So, as you can see here, Microsoft Word has a few different tabs, and they have a lot of different tools in each. In order to get first at state and 10 nationals, I had to understand each different tool and how to use it to its right ability in each different tab. But my next math principle is math principle number 6, attendance to precision. For this, I chose to use the cost list I made for the National Leadership Conference. Because we're getting sponsored, I needed to know how much everything costs. Because if something was too low, that would mean, hey, we have to pay this out of pocket now. Can we even do that? And if we had it too high, they were like, oh wait, guys, cheat us out of our money. We don't want to sponsor you again, which would ruin opportunities for future students to do something like this. To go into how exactly I had to make this, we stayed at 2 different hotels. First off, the Hyatt Regency, which cost about $31. But because of how the schedule was, we had to actually stay in a second hotel for the final night, which ended up being about $600. As well as this, we had to calculate average price for food, how much the registration fee was, how much each flight was, and the average cost of travel in the city. The one trait I'd like to cover is civility and collaboration, because I feel like this is the biggest thing during my entire project. So I had to interact with fellow nationalists, state leaders, instructors, state and national officers, and a lot more people like that. As well as this, I sold cookies to seniors and underclassmen, as well as worked with Mr. Summers. Now you might remember that I said I sold the cookies there for free. No, I didn't actually say that, that's what I'm talking about now. I ended up selling cookies at FunFest for free because I worked with Mr. Summers in order to make them free. Now, because we didn't sell them all, I was able to go around the next day and sell cookies to underclassmen. And for this, I had to make a business proposal for them, like, hey, sorry, not a business proposal, a sales pitch. It's like, why would I want these cookies? Well, they're cheap, there's a lot of them, there's chocolate, there's sugar, there's peanut butter, whatever you guys like. There's $2, 2 cookies, sounds like a great deal to me. And the people I collaborate with, well, as I just said, I collaborated with the students that give the cookies away and sell them. I worked with FBLA members to help make sure they can get where I am. I worked with officers so I can make sure I can get where I am. As well as I worked with Mr. Newman, Mr. Tessie, the Satterleys, and Techstars in order to make sure we could afford going to the Strip and make sure I could actually do everything I could do. Now, if I could do this again, what would I do differently? Well, I would have actually prepared for that test more. Because, as I said earlier, I thought the national assessment would be exactly like the state test. I was wrong. That test was completely different. Because I wasn't prepared, I didn't do as well as I could. As well as I wanted to redo the production process. Because during that process, I focused more on quantity than quality, when I really should have focused on quality. And then the final thing I'd like to redo is actually having the travel skill. I need it because I would love to actually have that. Now, before I end here, there are a couple people I have to thank. Mr. Newman, Mr. Tessie, Mr. House, and the entirety of FBLA. Well, if I would love to thank all of you, that would take way too much time. In fact, I'd be here for about 3 hours if I could do everything properly. So, the National Leadership Conference this year is in Atlanta. And given how districts went this year, I have one thing to ask you all. Wish me luck. Thank you.
Questions?
Can you tell us a little bit about the actual conference?
Yes. So the conference, what do you mean exactly? Sorry, there's a lot of stuff that went on.
Did you attend any specific, seminars or?
Yes, I went to a lot of workshops, which taught me a lot about different skills. Like, I went to one about IT cybersecurity. Like, hey, this is a growing field, and this is why it's so important. Another one I went to was within business. That way I could figure out like, hey, this is what they can do, and this is what they can do today versus what they couldn't do 50 years ago.
What did you learn from other students at the conference?
At the conference, I learned like what it's like in other states. For example, I've only lived in Colorado. I have no idea what the culture in other states are. For example, in Kentucky, they might do something completely different than we do it here.
Would you talk about integrity and leadership, please?
Yes, I can. Let me. Sorry, I just have to find it really quick. Integrity and leadership. So, integrity. That was a big thing throughout this entire trip as well. I had to make sure I didn't cheat off of others during the entire testing process, because if I did that, that would be an immediate 0. I wouldn't feel good about myself because I would know I wasn't using anything I learned. I was using something someone else learned. As well as this, the way we were seated, I could have just been cheating off a completely wrong test. So someone might have been taking a test about agriculture, and they chose answer C, like, oh, answer C, that must be right. I was taking a test about word processing, not agriculture. As well as this, I had to use the money that the Saturday gave us appropriately. They gave us about $3,000 to $6,000. And I think just like, ooh, $36,000? I can skip nationals. I want to buy a new gaming PC. So I had to make sure I use that money appropriately. In leadership, I was in charge of a lot of the cookie making, as well as I created an itinerary for the trip itself. As well as this, after the trip this year, I'm the FBLA social media manager. When I did this entire trip, I was a member. But because of a lot of things I learned, as well as the things I learned on this trip, as well as the experience I gained through FBLA, I'm able to now lead others to do what I did.
Starting in a Waffle House, with hot coffee on the table and laughter in the air. The first line of Breakfast at the Waffle House is just the beginning of a book driven by the question of how can I properly display my understanding of mental health and properly address it. My name is Rosa Chavez, and the best way I could describe myself to you all is to say that I am an amateur artist. I use the word amateur because it derives from the Latin word amar, which means to do things for the love of it. I love to create art from music to writing. So throughout this presentation, I ask you to keep this in the back of your mind. This story and all it represents is my love given form. My mentor is Miss Miller. She has been teaching English for 8 years and she loves stories. And I have been very fortunate to have her as my consultant throughout this project. So as I said, I wrote a book, and if you want to get technical, it would be categorized as a novella, which is of anywhere between 30,000 to 50,000 words, or 332 pages. It follows the Everett family, who are suddenly left incomplete after the loss of their brother Curtis. However, in 2019, I was writing a completely different story that referenced my research paper, which was that focused on the emotional toll of gifted kids and how they can face the emotional toll they face due to their title and the nature of their giftedness. However, that did not last long because the pandemic hit and I was suddenly thrown into an environment that left me into a poor state of mental health. So that experience shifted my world, and therefore my heart, and therefore this book. So reading and writing is very literal in the sense of writing a book. This book is about loss and acceptance, but as far as mental health goes, I only have my own experience and anything that my friends have willingly shared with me. So therefore, I was not educated enough on mental health to address it with the proper integrity. This was a problem that I needed to persevere through. So I chose several media examples that are listed on the left that I felt properly communicated the issues that I intended to. But truly, the way to see the communication of my knowledge on mental health is within the book itself. On the right, you will see an excerpt from chapter 13, which is the chapter of Kurt's funeral and addresses the family's grief. Writing this book has been quite a challenge. I had already started writing the book when I had to take a step back to address several problems and create a plan to persevere through them. Non-specific changes I was making led me to struggle with the problem of creep scope. So to persevere through this, I started with the end first. So that no matter what happened while I was writing, I always knew where I needed to end up. Another thing I needed to consider was, of course, my own mental health, which was something I didn't consider when writing a book about mental health. I struggle from burnout and procrastination, so to persevere through this, I created a list of activities that related to my book to help me ensure that if I just couldn't write, just couldn't do it, I always had something to do that was productive, and that almost unconditional productivity really positively impacted my mental health. And then precision, I find I do better with a clear, structured plan, so in a continued effort to avoid creep scope, I wrote down the entire plan of my book, which is in the notebook that I handed out. This precise plan allowed me to review what I wanted to happen and what I needed to happen, so if writer's block ever occurred, I was able to persevere through that by reflecting on my plan and figure out where the story needed to go next. So in order to be precise, you have to have structure. As I said, burnout was a real problem that I am still constantly addressing today. So one way I persevered through it was to create a very structured schedule for myself. On the right, you will see a calendar from June 2021 that dedicated every Sunday to writing. This designated time slot helped me create a repeating pattern of consistency. So even if I wasn't writing, I was drawing out characters or creating their world. Earlier, I had mentioned that I'd written out a precise draft of all the events in my book. I did this process 3 times when writing because it was a technique that I found allowed me to stay very precise and figure out the key events that I needed to address in order to properly answer my driving question. So agility, it is defined by the ability to quickly adapt to change. However, I would define it as the ability to pick yourself back up and keep going. Agility is the process of trial and error, and it can be closely compared to tenacity, which is persevering without exception. I rewrote the first chapter of my book 7 times, and I intend to do it again. I knew my ending. In every version of the book, I knew where I wanted to end up, but I struggled with finding a beginning. So every time I wrote, I learned what didn't work, and I was able to persevere through that and take that failure and experience and move on. In front of you, there are 3 versions of chapter 1. The one out of the 7 is presented in front of you. It's only 2.5 pages long. It is the shortest out of all of them, and that is because it is written in first person. That perspective just didn't work for me. So I was able to discard that draft and take 1 step closer to my final draft. So lessons learned is that love takes time and love takes work. Love alone can take you far, but committing to that love creates a passion. And that is the biggest lesson that I have learned. I would say that I'm passionate and I'm always willing to dive in. However, when things get hard, I tend to want to swim to shore. This book, however, was something that I was determined to see through. The love that I have for myself was the reason that I kept going, because this book is my love. So whenever I worked on this book, I always walked away with a deeper understanding of myself through the characters in this story. So in a way, I was addressing my own mental health through these characters, and as they found acceptance through their grief and loss, my heart did too. I say this book is my heart because when I first started writing, it was a very broad book about depression and loss and grief. So as I was creating these scenarios in my head that I thought I was just, pulling and innovating, I realized that they were actually coming from my heart. There's a scene in chapter 13 where Tucker worries about forgetting his brother's smile. And I don't remember my oldest brother's smile. And it's realizing things like that when you don't realize a loved one's laugh. You don't remember it, the sparkle in their eyes. And that is such a sad thing to realize that you forgot. However, I can say that while I am sad, I'm also healed. Breakfast at the Waffle House is about healing, and that is what writing has done for me. Every time I write, I gain such a deep love and understanding for myself just by writing. So whether that be little poems, jokes, or prayers, start writing.
Questions?
What was your first math skill, Rosa? I missed it.
I did too.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your mentor and how you collaborated or got to,
So the
support
first time,
this process?
the first time that I met Miss Miller was actually during COVID. So I had to come into the building on a Friday, no one was there, and we talked about, I presented her the plan, and she gave me the opportunity, she encouraged me to really explore the different writing perspectives. So that's actually why I started to first write in first person, because we talked a little bit about books because we're both big readers, and a lot of our favorite books were written in first person, so she inspired me to reach out and branch out and try different things. And we met a lot more regularly than we had later years, and it was really just me talking through the plan and plots, and she supported me through saying, well, how does this support your driving question, or is this something that is absolutely necessary? And she really helped me narrow down the book.
Can you tell me how integrity and leadership played a role in your project?
Of course. So integrity, I knew what I wanted to write, and the characters, obviously, they needed to represent that knowledge. I explained it earlier, I think the highest form of integrity comes in the fact that I was addressing very sensitive subjects. Kurt in the story, he suffers from schizophrenia, and I do not know anyone with schizophrenia at all, so this was something I was very unfamiliar with. So I had to take initiative and have integrity in knowing that I couldn't just write, about someone that has schizophrenia just willy-nilly, because I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't even know if Curtis would fall in the age range of someone that would start showing symptoms of schizophrenia. So that was actually by sheer coincidence once I started to research it. So, and I think that is the deepest form of integrity, is knowing and also to have civility when writing about real-world struggles, to make sure that when you're writing about those, you're connecting with an audience and you're showing your support through that knowledge.
Who do you think your audience will be?
I love to read young adult fiction, so I kind of aimed towards that. Personally, I like books that address deeper situations, and I've always found a comfort in it. And I tend to find it as people that are in my age range.
Okay, thank you.
When you were doing all your drafts and rewriting, did you find yourself changing everything dramatically, or just refining on the
It actually, I think so. So if we go back to our timeline slide, in 2019, I say it was about the struggles of being a gifted kid, but it was also a murder mystery. Their father would have gotten murdered, and then their brother would too. So that was a huge drastic change that just was me writing just for the sheer passion of it. But then as my world started to change and I started to grow as a person, I started to really discover what issues were important to me. So I think in charge of something that is exciting and kind of gritty as ooh, a mystery, it very much mellowed down to something that was more personal and deep, that accounted for a lot more heart.
I would like to thank you all for being here and letting me be here. I've had some recent health complications lately, so I'm really grateful to be here. My name is Connor McCardle, and this is my capstone presentation. Students, CTE, and the future of education. I knew that I needed to leave high school with a plan. I wanted to get as much experience in many different fields while in high school. I know that myself and many of my peers don't have the financial ability to spend time finding ourselves in college. We need to have a plan going in, and we need to be ready to get it done quickly. My driving question was, how can CTE opportunities in high school better prepare students for post-secondary education and early entry into the workforce? My professional consultant was my host advisor, Mr. Lopez. A little bit more about myself. I was born and raised here in Colorado. I love rock climbing, snowboarding, mountain biking, just getting outside whenever I have the opportunity. I also love helping those in need whenever I'm able to. Some of my accomplishments and passions: I was a police cadet for the Florence Police Department. I was also a varsity soccer player here at Kansas City High School. I recently placed 7th at the state wrestling tournament, and I'm also host of Vice President. My capstone began when I began pursuing CTE pathway courses here at CCHS. I have received roughly 45 college credits. I have completed the CNA certification, and I placed top 10 at an international competition in CPR and first aid. My capstone began in August of 2020 when I began taking CTE courses here at CCHS, like medical terminology and CPR and first aid certifications. Then in August of 2021, I started taking more advanced courses like CNA and basic life support. Also in August of 2021, I joined the first HOSA chapter ever at CCHS. In September, I was elected vice president, and in December, myself and another motivated member, Olivia Groders, competed in a written exam on human anatomy and physiology and CPR first aid skills, where we placed top 20% in all competitors in the state of Colorado, allowing us to then in February go and compete at the State Leadership Conference in Denver, where we completed a hands-on skills evaluation in CPR and first aid. We ended up placing 3rd. which allowed us to compete then in June of 2022 at the International Leadership Conference, where we once again placed in the top 20% out of all competitors on a written exam in human anatomy and physiology, CPR, and first aid. We then placed 10th in the hands-on skills evaluation. This all began when I began taking different CTE programs here at CCHS. I started with medical terminology to explore the medical field, and I started to enjoy it. Then when HOSA formed, I joined to see if I would enjoy that too, and I started to develop a passion. I joined the CNA certification course, completed it, I got my first real look into what healthcare was like at our clinical rotation at a nursing home nearby. I then competed at the State Leadership Conference in CPR and First Aid, where I got to experience many different educational and career opportunities in healthcare. Then at the International Leadership Conference, where my partner and I placed 10th, it solidified my commitment to the healthcare pathway as I was really able to explore in-depth different educational and career opportunities in healthcare. I then began taking more advanced science and biology courses such as Bio 111 and Anatomy and Physiology 1 here at BCC. Work-based experiences are a cornerstone of CTE education. I completed a clinical rotation at St. Thomas More Hospital for my PACE internship. I was able to experience several different departments. This is where I really discovered my passion for emergency medicine. I even got to spend a couple extra weeks in the emergency department. I showed mastery of reading and writing through reading and understanding official competition guidelines for HOSA. As you can see, the packet I've handed out labeled HOSA. It has example questions for our written exams, as well as skills competition guidelines for the hands-on evaluation. Scoring in the top 20% on the written exam in the first round of testing in the State Leadership Conference and International Leadership Conference. Passing my Certified Nursing Assistant State Board written exam, and understanding Colorado Nurse Aid Candidate Handbook guidelines for examination and skill standards. That is the packet labeled Credentia. It also has example questions and guidelines for the skills exam. I showed mastery of communicating. When I communicate with elderly residents in the nursing home, it is very important that I communicate clearly so that way they understand who I am, what I am doing, but also so I can form strong, lasting relationships with them. I use validation therapy with dementia patients, and communicating with my partner during the State Leadership Conference and International Leadership Conference. Communicating with other nursing home staff to report resident condition, and using different communication techniques with individuals with disabilities, such as hearing impairments or cognitive impairments. The first math principle I chose was math principle number 1. Make sense of problems to persevere in solving them. I identified that the cost of college is rising from 2000 to 2022. Average post-secondary tuition inflation outpaced wage inflation by 111.4%. This is according to the Education Data Initiative of 2022. I understood that average student loan debt in the U.S. has risen to over $29,000, according to U.S. News and World Report. And I attacked this problem aggressively by pursuing CTE opportunities in high school, saving approximately $3,501 per year. The next math principle I chose was math principle number 6. Attains to precision. All care requires that you follow protocols exactly in order to ensure patient safety. You must adhere to standards of CPR per the American Heart Association that follows a strict algorithm for each population. You can see provided examples. They should look something like this. The third math principle I chose was math principle number 7. Looks for and makes use of structure. I identified the pattern that students involved in career and technical student organizations and who pursued CTE pathways entered their career fields faster and with better developed skills than their peers. I utilized these patterns to purposefully select courses and map concurrent enrollment classes so that way I would maximize my college credit that I earned while in high school and enter the workforce in my future career prior to graduation. According to the U.S. Department of Education in 2022, 8 years after their expected graduation date, students who focused on career and technical education, CTE courses, while in high school had higher median annual earnings than students who did not focus on CTE. In this graph, you can see that people who pursued CTE and concurrent enrollment courses while in high school in healthcare, education, IT, English, and transportation outearned their peers 7 years after high school graduation. CCHS does an amazing job of supporting students in this. In 2021, of the 228 graduating seniors, 198 took concurrent enrollment courses. This saves about $844,000 in tuition fees. One student even earned their associate's degree. In 2022, 179 out of 199 graduating seniors took concurrent enrollment courses. This saved about $806,000 in tuition. 3 students even graduated with their associate's degree. The total students receiving certification courses from the 2021 to 2022 school year here at CCHS was 419. This includes CNA and several other certification courses offered through our CTE department. My trait I chose was tenacity. My original mentor for my original capstone passed away unexpectedly. I had to persevere to find a new mentor, and I had to change my projects entirely. I learned that no matter what has happened or how committed you are to a plan, something completely out of your control can change it. I believed that I was going into law enforcement my entire life, and then I really discovered my true passion for healthcare. Cherie was my original capstone mentor, but Cherie was more than just a mentor for my capstone. She was a mentor in all aspects of my life. While in the cadet program, pursuing a career in law enforcement, she taught me how a good cop treats people with respect and doesn't belittle or abuse their authority. But Cherie was also a friend. She was constantly cracking jokes and putting smiles on our faces. My first experience in healthcare was actually a CPR class I took with Cherie and her daughter Kellen for the Florence Cadet Program. Unexpectedly, less than 6 months later, Kellen would be attempting to use these skills learned in this class to try and save Cherie's life, to try and save her mother's life. Unfortunately, Cherie passed away. This devastated me. It completely altered the course of my capstone, but also of my life. After Cherie's passing, it was difficult to find motivation for my previous capstone or for anything. I quit wrestling, my grades suffered, and I suffered. However, I did not let that stop me. In fact, it drove me into healthcare even more. I did not let that stop me. In fact, it drove me into healthcare even more. It led me to my passion for caring for others the way Cherie cared for me. I was committed to accomplishing my goal of being a nurse, and now I'm not going to let anything stop me. I learned that there are many amazing opportunities in CTE programs in high school, and if you truly take advantage of them, you can far surpass your peers in education and entry into the workforce. Some of the challenges I faced were I had to completely change my capstone because of Cherie's passing. I learned that unexpected events happen, and they're completely out of our control, but we can't let that stop us from achieving our goals. My ultimate goal is to become a registered nurse, and completing the CNA certification course is a prerequisite for nursing school. Registered nurses are also required to maintain the CPR certification. My call to action is don't sit by and let those opportunities pass you by. There are so many opportunities to explore different careers and earn college credit and enter the workforce with a certification before even graduating high school.
Can you tell me how civility and collaboration played a role in your project?
Civility. Yeah. When providing care for patients, you need to treat them with the same respect you'd want your family to be treated with. You can also ask for advice from coworkers for the best way to care with maybe difficult patients or patients you're having a hard time connecting with. I learned that when people are treated with empathy, they feel listened to and they can develop stronger, lasting relationships. And it also improves their self-esteem. Effectively communicating also improves all aspects of your interaction with them. This project has been a great way for me to really focus and be more conscious on my interactions with others to make sure I'm treating everyone with empathy and respect.
Can you speak to integrity and leadership, please?
When providing care for residents, they are sometimes in compromising or exposing positions, and it is our duty as caretakers to provide privacy and dignities in these situations. We also have a responsibility to protect private patient information through HIPAA laws. I learned that no matter the situation, no matter a person's condition, you always need to treat them with the same dignity and respect you would want to be treated with. I also learned to be more discreet when talking to others about patient information or other sensitive information that people may not want to be heard.
Thank you, and I have a comment to make that I think you'd be a great ambassador for the programs here at CCHS.
Thank you so much.
Do you see yourself continuing your education with a bachelor's in nursing?
I have thought about it. Ultimately, my goal would be complete my master's degree and become a nurse practitioner.
Nice.
I think originally I want to stop at my associate's degree, and I really want to get working. I want to start working in the emergency room.
Nice.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. My name is Zachary Trujillo, and my capstone project was on helping ill and injured members in our community. I had two driving questions throughout this capstone project. My first one was, how do I help ill and injured people throughout the community? My second one was, how do I make myself a better healthcare provider? The reason I have two driving questions is because the first one allows me to have an impact now. People who are sick now need help now, not later. Alternatively, people who are sick later need help later, not now. So these two driving questions allow me to not just have an impact now, but a long-lasting impact, which makes this project better. So I am Zachary Trujillo. I'm part of the class of 2023 here at CCHS. I'm a senior. I'm a CNA. I'm looking for a career in healthcare, specifically as a registered nurse, and I'm in the health pathway here. My professional consultant for my project was Danny Donnell. Danny Donnell is a registered nurse with a BSN. She has 7 years experience in registered nursing. She has experience in hospital nursing and infusion oncology nursing and public health. She is also the district nurse for the schools and the sexual health educator here. The product I made, I already handed you, is a health pamphlet for the heart and lungs. The reason I made a pamphlet instead of just giving a couple speeches is it allows me to have a longer lasting impact and a more targeted impact. If I just go give 1 or 2 speeches that people are forced to sit through, not only is that not targeted towards people who may care if they were forced to go to it, they probably don't care about the information I'm telling them, and I only give it 1 or 2 times. This pamphlet allows me to put it in targeted areas, and only people who actually care to improve their health will actually pick it up and read through it. The best location I got this in is the cardiopulmonary rehab region of St. Thomas More. You can see my packet there on the bottom left. And obviously, if you're in the cardiopulmonary rehab region, you're already looking to improve your heart and lung health. So I think it's a perfect location to have my pamphlet. Fortunately, I don't have time to go over this pamphlet in detail, but I encourage you to look through it later if you have time. As far as the field work for my project, I had a PACE internship at St. Thomas More as a nurse shadow. I did clinical rotations at Skyline Nursing Home, and over my junior summer, I worked full-time at Skyline Nursing Home as a CNA. The reason this was important to my project is it gives me practical hands-on experience in the healthcare field. A good example of this is you can't teach someone how to weld by giving them a book. I think the same goes for nursing. You just can't read a book and be a nurse. You have to have the experience too. So this helps me become a better healthcare provider, this hands-on experience I gained through this project. A rough timeline of my project is in 2019, my freshman year, I picked my capstone topic. I found some good sources from the CDC and WHO, and I wrote my research paper. And a while after that, I started my CNA class to start being certified. After that, we went to clinical rotations at Skyline Nursing Home. Then after that was done, I took my boards and got certified. I did an internship at St. Thomas More, and at the same time started working on my pamphlet. Around the same time I finished my internship, I finished my pamphlet, and I got my pamphlet displayed in 2 areas here in Canyon City. One I already mentioned, the cardiopulmonary rehab region of St. Thomas More, and I also got it displayed at the public health clinic here, across from the courthouse. After that, I presented my capstone, got a 2.7, and today I'm here presenting for the scholarship and at the expo. For knowledge of ELA, my first one is writing applications. My writing application is my research paper, which I have linked. It furthered my ability to research. So when I went into this project, I just had like 5 sources from the CDC and WHO. One of them is like a 68-page PDF of nothing but numbers and percentages. To the average person, that probably means nothing. But this project allowed me to sit down, go through that, and actually interpret what all that data means and make something of it, and make a product that the average person can go through and understand and better themselves with that information. And all this information I got showed that heart and lung issues are the #1 killer in the United States, so it allowed me to make my packet targeted to have the broadest impact possible. It also made this project important to me because as a healthcare provider, it's not just my job, but also my passion to keep people healthy and out of the hospital to start with. So if I can prevent them from being sick, they don't even have to be healed in the first place. As for communication, throughout the healthcare field, you're constantly communicating, but I just chose a basic few examples of some emails. Initially, looking for my mentor, I emailed the nurse here, and she referred me to my mentor, Donnie Donnell, which you can see some more examples of emails for here. As for oral expression, once again, in the healthcare field, you're constantly communicating with people, whether that be your patients, your coworkers, that be your charge nurse, the capstone progress, you have to communicate with teachers. You have to communicate with just about everyone in this field, so it's a massive part of this project and my career. Of course, also preparing for and giving the speech is also a good example of vocal expression. As for mathematical skills, the first one I chose was modeling with mathematics. Here you can see I made a pie chart from the data I pulled from the CDC. 23% of people die every year, or at least in 2019, from heart disease, 21% from cancer, 6% from accidents, and 5.5% from chronic lower respiratory diseases. That's over half of people that die in the United States every year, and that goes into my next point of abstract and quantitative reasoning. Seeing that more than half the people in the United States die from those things alone, and most of those can be linked to the heart and the lungs, and that many of those causes of death have preventable things that you can do to stop you from getting those diseases, I chose this as my topic for my pamphlet, because once again, I thought it would give me the broadest approach to help the most people possible, and to educate them, to keep them healthier and out of the hospital to start with. For my last mathematical skill, I chose attending to precision. Attending to precision was important throughout this project and in the career of healthcare, because when you're taking a blood pressure, you must take it accurately and record it accurately. If you do not do so, the healthcare team may not be able to make educated decisions. Same thing goes for the pulse. You have to take it for the full minute and make sure you recorded it accurately and saw if it was normal or not. Because if you don't do this, you can miss early warning signs of something like a heart attack. As far as for the traits and skill, the number one trait and skill that I chose for this capstone is integrity. To me, integrity is the most important part of healthcare, because if you don't have integrity, you may end up doing more harm than you're doing good. Because a good example of this is precautions. If someone's on contact precautions from having MRSA, which is a bacterial infection, if no one's looking, it's easy to skip through the process of gowning up, gloving up, washing your hands, putting on the face shield every time you go in their room multiple times throughout the day. And it's very easy to skip that step if no one's looking. But if you do skip that step, you risk spreading that infection to other patients. And at that point, why are you even there? You're doing more harm than you are good, and you may as well not even be a healthcare provider. So integrity to me is the most important part of my field. The overall lesson I learned from this project is just how many deaths and how much suffering in the United States is preventable. And it gave me good book knowledge and good practical knowledge of healthcare, which will help me be a better healthcare provider in the future. As for my call to action, I encourage everyone in the audience tonight to maybe, if you have time, read through my pamphlet and look further into ways that you can make your life healthier. To not just increase the length of your life, but also the quality of your life. You may live to 90, but if 40 of those years were spent bedridden, what do those 90 years really matter? Compared to if you only lived to 75, but even to the very last day you were walking around being happy, I consider that a much better life. Reflecting on this project, I learned that much of the suffering you see in the United States is just preventable, and it's sad to see that if people made better choices in their life, that all of that suffering could have been avoided. So that's why this was my main focus throughout this project. And as far as the impact on my career and my patients, I'm hoping that this makes me a significantly better healthcare provider to help my patients not just get out of the hospital, but stay out of the hospital and live better and healthier lives. Thank you.
Zach, would you speak to civility and collaboration?
Yes. So, in this project, I displayed civility by caring for people's wants and needs. When you're in the healthcare field, it's not just about getting them out of the hospital. It's about actually treating them and caring for them as a person. So you need to take time to be patient with them, even if they ask you the same thing over and over. Sit down, be patient with them, show compassion and care, because that's another person who's ill. And you need to treat them just as that, if not even better, to make sure that it's like the holistic approach. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but you're not just treating a person's body, you're also treating their mind. So you need to be kind to them and have civility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How do you anticipate that being an RN will be different in 30 years compared to today?
In 30 years from today, I think a lot of the aspects of being an RN will probably be, some parts will be easier, but I also think some parts will be harder. There's just some things you can't change about nursing. There's just some things a robot can't do. Per se, ultrasounds will probably get easier as technology for that improves, so that will make that part of my job easier. But as more technology comes out, who knows, like say they start implanting chips in people to regulate bodily functions, and I have to go learn how to mess with those computer chips to make sure they don't malfunction or something, so I might have to learn that. So not only will it become easier, but there may be new things that I can't even think of that would make the job harder as well. So it's, in 30 years, it's really hard to say where this could go. But there's just some things about nursing you can't change.
So how far do you see your career going in terms of, do you see yourself being a nurse practitioner, a physician?
I have thought about that. I don't necessarily want to extend to being a physician because I like the more hands-on approach. And with a doctor, there is most certainly hands-on activities, but it's much more paperwork, much more meetings, arguing with insurance.
Yeah.
I have thought about being a nurse practitioner, though. So that is actually definitely an option in my career. But I like the look of being a registered nurse most, maybe specializing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You seem really confident in your career choice. Have you ever had any second thoughts about other paths?
Second thoughts, well, I thought about being maybe a physical therapist. I thought, initially when I was a kid, I thought about being a dentist. So it's always been in the healthcare area. But I'd say I got really confident about my career choice about when I started high school, and especially going into CNA class, that pretty much sealed it because I enjoyed that so much. But not much wavering as far as healthcare goes.
7.4% of students grade 9 through 12 attempted suicide in 2017 in the U.S., and 17.2% seriously thought about it. This was a quote I found when researching suicide rates in the high schools of the U.S. from childstrends.org. This brought me to my topic, Together to Fight Suicide. I wanted to create resources for high school students to find a healthy way to deal with their mental health. My driving question is, how can I educate my community about the increasing numbers of suicide by engaging in the Suicide Prevention Walk and creating vouchers for free mental health sessions? I'm Karina. I'm a senior at the high school. I'm in P-Tech. I'm furthering my EMT career and further studying forensic science. My professional consultant is Jamie Murray. She's the district behavioral health counselor of Fremont County. She informed me of the resources I need to create these vouchers. On January 14th of 2021, Fremont County Department of Public Health and Environment gave the schools a district's grant. This grant paid for one counselor in every single school in our district. It also paid for 100 vouchers with 2 free hours of counseling sessions for high school students. On that same day, I started creating my vouchers and deciding how I was going to distribute them to high school students. On February 6th of 2021, I participated in the Science of Suicide curriculum pilot to the sophomores of that year. That was my sophomore year as well, from peer to peer, teaching them suicidal ideation in high school students. On February 7th of 2021, I participated and taught in the QPR training to the Young Life staff. This was a training to teach the Young Life staff who interacts with high school individuals how to question a suicidal individual, persuade them to get help, and refer them where to get help. On September 25th of 2021, I participated in the suicide walk hosted by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. This walk happens every year in September for Suicide Awareness Month in our district. I brought all my friends with me, and I also encouraged my community in social media and my school to participate in this walk to be educated about suicide rates. For my English reading and writing, I created the vouchers. These vouchers are for Sol Vista and Gateway to Success. Both vouchers have information about both counseling company on the front and instructions on the back. My second part of my reading and writing is my APA research paper. This was initially about suicide rates off the Royal Gorge Bridge in Canyon City. However, this is a problem that is larger than I can attack by myself. I would love to be included in it in my future. I decided to focus more on high school students and how I could impact them. The Signs of Suicide, I was included in a drive with the district for the papers that were given to students in that class. I was allowed to edit it to make it more comfortable for high school students to read. Email communication was a big part of my reading and writing because this was in the middle of COVID. It was important for me to be professional in my emails and communicating to these counseling companies to be professional with them. Communicating in emails was a big part of communication, but also communicating through Zoom. I was not at school every day, I was in cohorts, so being on those Zoom meets and being on time to them is a big part of communication in my capstone. I communicated in my QPR training I role-played a suicidal ideation individual in high school for those Young Life staff members to practice their skills that I just taught them. In the Signs of Suicide pilot, I communicated to my own peers about suicidal ideation in themselves and their friends. I also communicated in a newspaper interview by the Canyon City Daily Record. I told my community about my project, how their students could get help, and that I had been there too, to establish that comfortability and break the mental health stigma. I also communicated in a marketing video for the high school students. This was important for high school students to know where they could find these vouchers and how they could use them. Here's that video.
Hi CCHS, I'm Karina Blatnick, and I relocated the Teen Wellness vouchers at your convenience. They are eligible for 2 free 1-hour sessions at Sol Vista Health and Gateway to Success. Here's where they can be found.
For my first math principle that I completed, it was make sense of problems. I identified the problem of lack of resources for suicidal individuals in my high school, and I tackled that problem by creating these vouchers. Out of the 100 vouchers that were made, 54 of them were taken. Counted this number by the vouchers that are currently still in my high school today. Of those 54 that were taken, 5 of them were used. This is a smaller number and may not be as accurate as it can be due to HIPAA violations. Some students may not have shared that they had gotten counseling. However, it is 9.3% in helping me not contribute to that 7.3% of high school students that committed suicide. My second math principle I completed is uses appropriate tools. To create these vouchers, I used Canva, a platform where you can use templates to create anything that you want. I used Canva with also the logos from the high school and each counseling company. My second tool is my SOS screen. This was given to high school students at the end of the pilot class. They were allowed to fill out the screen and let the counselors of my school know if they were feeling suicidal or if they knew of someone who was. My third tool is the QPR slideshow. I used this slideshow to teach myself the information I was about to teach the Young Life staff before I taught it to them. My third math principle is attends to precision. Being precise in my capstone was very important in my vouchers especially. Each voucher has the phone number and address of both counseling companies. Making sure the address and phone number is correct on these vouchers is very precise. Also, making sure that the age on the vouchers is correct. You only have to be 12 years old to get counseling without your parents being there with you. This was important to give to my high school students so they knew that they could use these. On the left, you can see that number 2 has the appointment and part of the address. I was waiting for an email back, and on the right you can see that I added more instruction due to an email. This is a picture from Canva of my version history. You can see that there are several times in a day that I visit this voucher and edit it throughout emails given to me. My trait I want to share with you today is agency and empowerment. I wanted those vouchers to be used. I wanted students to know that I had been there too, and so I created a video of the location and put them in a discrete location. It's important for high school students to be able to use these at their own time and when they want to. Putting these in the bathroom is important because some of them don't want people to know they want to get help. This is a relevant skill for me to be an EMT in my career later on. Being able to identify suicidal individuals is important. I have a new understanding of the high school point of view and being able to empower my peers through my newspaper interview and telling them that I had been there too. What I want to share with you today is to recognize your strengths. The Sources of Strength wheel tells you what your strengths are within your life. Mental health for me is a big slice, and I think it should be for all high school students and you listening today. I encourage you to help not contribute to that 7.4% of high school students that committed suicide. A lesson learned for me is accessibility. When vouchers and resources are more available to high school students, they are more likely to use them. If I put them in a location where they are discreet and they don't have to tell anybody they want to use them, they're more likely to use them. I also learned the importance of the high school point of view. Being in high school and talking to other peers establishes a comfortability level between me and other high schoolers. And also the marketing. If they didn't know where the vouchers were and they just saw it in the bathroom, they probably wouldn't pick it up. But putting that marketing video out on the announcements that high school students saw every day was really important to impact the use of these vouchers. Thank you.
This is, of course, a really difficult topic that we chose. How did that impact you working with your peers on such a personal level?
So being in the midst of COVID, this was definitely a very impactful project. Working with my peers was something that was very empowering in the end, but in the beginning it was very nerve-wracking. Standing in front of them and telling them that I had been there too was something that I had to overcome on my own before I could encourage others to do so. And so being in that newspaper article where my family and even my grandpa read it and was like, I never knew that about you, that's impactful to me, first of all. But getting over that and overcoming that through my project and then being able to impact others is something that I love that I did and I'm so passionate about.
How do you see this impacting your future career choice?
Being able to identify suicidal individuals will impact being an EMT. Because if I'm coming up on an individual that has those suicidal ideation, I'll be able to recognize it probably before my coworkers will, since I've had these skills early on. So just being able to see that in somebody and impact them early in the stages before it progresses into something worse.
Thank you.
Can you speak to how tenacity and reflection played a role in your project?
So tonicity and reflection. I had a lot of reflection on this project. Reflection today was that the age on the vouchers and the placement in the high school. I reflected on that because the age I had to add on the vouchers, I actually didn't know that you only had to be 12. And so in the midst of that project, that was something I added actually at the end. I didn't know you had to only be 12. Also, just reflecting on the way that I grew throughout the project in building all these skills, but also the placement in the high school. I reflected on that because when I first put them out, almost all of them were taken out of the bathroom and not actually in the public places I put them. And so then I moved the ones from the public places to the bathroom for the use of those vouchers. A part of tenacity is that this academic barrier of finding a mentor. Finding my mentor was really hard. When I started, I was kind of studying the Royal Gorge Bridge, which is a very big topic. And I kind of just reached out to Jamie, but it was really hard to find my mentor. And so just kind of persevering through that and keeping my motivation up to find that mentor is part of being tenacity.
It may shock some of you to know that more people can incorrectly name the right to bear arms as a First Amendment constitutional protection than the right of assembly or the right to petition. It is because our constitutional knowledge in the U.S. is so abysmal that I've chosen to focus my project on constitutional literacy, asking myself the question, what rights does the First Amendment actually protect, and how does this differentiate from the average understanding of them? Before we begin, here's a brief introduction to me. Hello, my name is Brooke Watley. I am a senior here at Canyon City High School, and I am interested in constitutional law, history, and public policy. I am also involved in FBLA, speech and debate, and I sit on a Colorado Gifted and Talented Student Board, among other activities. And I am in the Arts, Hospitality, and Education pathway. My mentors are first Danielle Trujillo, who is an alumna of Canyon City High School, who is now a CU Boulder Law graduate, who clerks for the Honorable Colorado Supreme Court State Justice Melissa Hart, and Matthew Cushing, who is a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder Law School and is the director of the Colorado chapter of the Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Project. In answering my driving question and in providing my capstone today, my goals are to improve constitutional literacy and bring access to national programs to CCHS students.
First, a look at my project timeline. My project began when I was introduced to the Marshall Brennan Moot Court and Literacy competition in August of my sophomore year. I was introduced to my mentors in the program, where I engaged in a considerable amount of agility and civility. And then I was educated by those very law students on what it meant to have a First Amendment right and protection to something, as well as how to do things like brief a law school case. In this, I displayed a considerable amount of innovation. And I will let this video explain to you a little bit more about exactly what Marshall Brennan is.
Fred, this is Brooke Watley. She's still an underclassman, and she's already earned the top spot in the National Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Project Moot Court Competition. It's a mouthful, I know, but it's as impressive as it sounds. Basically, Brooke was named Best Overall Petitioner in the country, winning a national championship based on public speaking and interpreting law based on Supreme Court decisions. This competition was held virtually at the end of last month. Brooke said that she, along with her senior classmate Logan Williams, were actually the only two people to have ever competed from Canyon City High School. She said this has predominantly been a Denver school event. Now, to prepare, both Brooke and Logan attended a 2-hour class every other week that was hosted by their mentors, third-year CU Boulder Law School students. The purpose of the competition is to get high school students to display their public speaking skills, to network, and to learn about careers in law.
Alrighty, so for the rest of my project, I then created a briefing book that utilized those skills that my mentors taught me. This is this book. It focuses on First Amendment issues that are important to Fremont County, such as prisons, schools, and even small businesses. I will pass this around at the end, and you will also be given a virtual link. And then, in doing so, I displayed a considerable amount of tenacity. And finally, I created a club at CCHS, a moot court club, that is connected to that Marshall Brennan program through CU Boulder. In doing so, I displayed leadership. As for my knowledge and communication, I obviously displayed a considerable amount of reading and writing. First, in my pre-search paper. This pre-search paper was actually where I unwittingly answered my own driving question of what rights does the First Amendment actually protect, and how does this differentiate from the average understanding of them. Through extensive research on the First Amendment that I did in writing this paper, I discovered that the inaccuracies of what people understand about the First Amendment produces more First Amendment rights. After all, it was people challenging a California law denying them the right to have vanity plates, which caused that to be a First Amendment protection. It is the chicken and the egg. It is a story of on and on. People misunderstand First Amendment rights because there is no limit to them, and they will always be misunderstanding them. Secondly, I of course made this book. So this book is actually using in-depth law school level material, case briefs brought by the Colorado State Supreme Court, Minnesota State Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court, and judicial bodies from all across America. And it breaks down this legal language into simple, easy to understand explanations of what rights students have and why they have them. So there was a considerable amount of reading and writing that I did for that. And then as for argumentation and conversations, I have here pictured my oral argument section that I competed in Marshall Brennan using. This is just a snippet of me introducing myself and beginning to make my case, but you will get to see more of that later. And then for knowledge and communication, I now have my math principles. So, my first math principle is make sense of all types of problems to persevere in solving them. I, of course, had issues wherein my emails got deleted and I lost a significant amount of my previous communication with Marshall Brennan and CU Boulder. But after 2 months of hard work, I was able to get most of those back. Similarly, another problem that I had was funding. This is about a $1,000 endeavor when you break it down for gas, hotel costs, cost of food, to get these students down here to teach our students at CCHS. But thankfully, after working with CU Boulder, I was able to find a donor that would cover this full amount, no matter the amount, every year. And I'm so honored to be able to do that. My second math principle is constructs viable arguments and critiques the reasoning of others. Of course, in any competition, there is going to be a considerable amount of argument going on, but I was arguing with some of the most foremost legal minds of the country, and here is a snippet from that. It'll load in.
Asking the court to create new law?
Absolutely. Absolutely not, Your Honor. I am simply asking that this court hold true with Tinker, that students be allowed to express these beliefs and prevent the creation of new policies such as this, which are highly overreaching and honestly laugh in the face of what this court decided in Tinker when they ruled that students do have constitutional rights and must be allowed to express these views. Jordan was not punished for her interruptions of class. If you look at the facts, Miss Washington was right. So I was forming my own arguments as well as dismissing the arguments of others in that time, showing that math principle. So, further on, my third and final math principle was going to be uses appropriate tools strategically. Now, what tool was I using? I was using the tool of court supremacy or court hierarchy. In the United States, there are two sections of court, federal and state level. Federal overrules state if the state is in that federal circuit, and Supreme Court overrules all. So, in making this book, I had to know exactly what state I was referencing, if that case was the highest case of order, in order to provide an accurate representation of the law and First Amendment constitutions to students and community members who are using this as a resource. And so that was an incredibly important tool that I had to be able to use properly. As for my traits that I chose to display, agency and empowerment. I showed agency when I challenged my analytical processing skills, and I gained an understanding of how to challenge myself while working constructively. In creating this briefing book in particular, this was a massive undertaking. I was working with law school level curriculum, with law school level concepts as a sophomore and junior in high school. I had no real legal training, I had no idea what I was doing, and it was incredibly difficult for me. And yet I continued to push on. Even when I wanted to quit, I continued to push myself to what would be my breaking point, and worked with that. And that is a skill that I can take into my future, no matter what I do. As for empowerment, well, you saw a clip of me voicing my personal theories about real-world topics to a large and very impressive audience. I was probably the least informed person in that room, and yet I had to look that judge dead in the eye and tell her that she was wrong, and in fact, the law could be interpreted this way for greater constitutional protections. That takes an incredible amount of self-confidence and empowerment. And in doing so, I hoped to not only create a legacy for myself, but also a legacy at CCHS. After all, I have now laid the groundwork for opportunities for students to empower themselves in the same way that I did, and engage in the same competition, and learn about their constitutional rights in the same way that I did. I've empowered myself as well as others. So, overall, I have improved my personal understanding of the First Amendment through projects and competitions, and I have answered my driving question, improving that First Amendment protections not only vary, but also have limits in what they can cover. And I face challenges in understanding the more unique and specialized concepts of the law, but also feeling prepared to confidently lead and educate others with such tricky topics. So, after all of this, I hope you can take the time to fully inform yourself on the basic concepts of the First Amendment and what those freedoms mean to you. Thank you.
Would you speak to agility and contribution, please?
Of course, let me pull up those slides for you. So, agility and contribution. In agility and contribution, I first, with agility, had to display the ability to accurately connect court precedents to future case decisions. So in that bit of argumentation that you saw me doing, I was telling a justice, who is in theory a Supreme Court justice, that previous case law from cases like Tinker versus Des Moines can be applied as past precedent to future or present precedent, such as with the case that I was given, wherein a girl had her First Amendment rights violated by her school for their punishment of her speech. And so I was able to show that past precedents can be used in the future, but I had to be able to argue that. And this is a tricky argument, but this is something that you have to be flexible in doing, and you have to really know your way around it. You have to be able to think on your feet and really be prepared for any kind of argumentation, which I think shows agility. As for the contribution aspect of that, I brought and established a program to CCHS that will show a legacy. I have partnered us with CU Boulder. We will forever be tied to CU Boulder. As long as there are students who want to compete in this program, who are interested in it, I have been assured that we will have funding and we will have law students who either virtually or in person are teaching these students. This is something that you can't overlook. This is a significant amount of contribution to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do you see yourself pursuing a law degree?
I do, yes. This competition was one of the competitions that really opened my eyes to just how much I loved the legal field, in particular constitutional law. So constitutional law covers things like the ACLU and human rights. Also, the UN does a fair bit of constitutional law.
Thank you.
Constable, things are happening every day.
All right, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to evaluate my project. My project stems from the questions, how can I create dresses that transform on stage for a community production of Cinderella? So, to start things off, my name is Chloe Martin and I'm a senior here at Canyon City High School. I was a part of the STEAM pathway. I've had many hobbies throughout my high school career, including sewing for 7 years and participating in theater, and I have a passion for the performing arts. My mentor was Miss Tanya Fisher. She is Mr. Fisher's right-hand man, covering everything from costumes to props to makeup. She was the key in my creation in these costumes. Speaking of which, let's get started on the costumes. So, our music director, Mr. Walter, announced in January that our musical was going to be the 2013 Broadway hit, Cinderella. After researching for my audition, I discovered that the show had 2 costumes that transformed on stage, as well as a handful of other custom costumes. I knew I had the skills to create these, so I set out a goal for myself that if I wasn't cast as a lead, I would create these costumes. When the cast list was announced and I received an ensemble role, I immediately started meeting with directors to get the ball rolling with these costumes. After some convincing, Mr. Walter allowed me to be the costume engineer for these transformation costumes, on top of my role as head of wardrobe and ensemble member. I spent 4 weeks researching how we could pull off these costumes, while Ms. Fisher and I waited on the funding for the materials we needed. We were finally able to get our materials during the last week of spring break, and from then on I was spending all my time at the school, including after rehearsals and weekends, to make sure these costumes were of high quality and done on time. I worked and worked until showtime, which ended up being postponed thanks to most of the cast getting either the strep or the flu or both. But I didn't get sick, so I was able to spend that time perfecting costumes before our show in mid-April. So, my process included researching, meeting with directors, acquiring resources, and making, which included getting actors' measurements, drafting or purchasing patterns, cutting fabric, pinning and sewing the pieces together, adding notions like closures and elastic, doing fit testing, and making adjustments. These are pictures of my Act 2 transformation costume, and as you can see, I actually had to create 2 copies of this costume so that it would fit both the Cinderella actress and our stepsister. I will show you the transformation now. So that would happen, the stepmother would rip apart the sleeves and the skirt, and then the fairy godmother would transform it from the petticoat and rags to the gold dress that she wore to the banquet. So I repeated the process of making these costumes for all of the other costumes, especially the other transformation costume, which is the classic rags to riches dresses that everyone thinks about when they hear the show. Once all these costumes were complete, the actors would put on stage and we performed with the costumes. These pictures depict Rain as Cinderella performing in the rags to riches costume. And then here's a video of that. So let's get started on these traits. We start off with my ELA traits. On the written side of things, I had to do a lot of communication with Ms. Fisher to make sure all the tasks were done on time, including a community to-do list and a quick change spreadsheet, which I will show in a minute. As well as we had to communicate with the directors and our rental company, since we rented the costumes that I did not create. I also communicated orally especially with the directors and Ms. Fisher, to make sure that I was interpreting their vision correctly and getting everything done on time, as well as informing performers, like Rain, who wore the dress, and the quick change people, to make sure everything was working smoothly. So this is my quick change spreadsheet. This is pretty much a spreadsheet of who wears what when. And this was a very important living document that showed, or made sure that everyone was where they needed to be at the right time. The sections highlighted in yellow are where we needed quick changers. So I was in charge of making sure that we had at least 2 people for each quick change, making sure everything was done on time so it would run smoothly. For the math side of things, the biggest component was making sense of problems to persevere in solving them. So I had to do a lot of research to make sure these were done correctly, since I had never done anything like this before. So I identified all the garments I needed to create, since there were a lot more than I was expecting. And I worked with the director to better understand his vision, rather than just doing what Broadway did. I interpreted what he wanted, and as well as researching all the other productions. You can see the Broadway and 2 high school productions on screen. I also attended to precision. So sewing is a very exact craft. 1 inch can mean the difference of a dress fitting perfectly or falling off the actress. So I had to make sure that everything was as precise as possible, as well as planning quick changes, because the minute meant the difference of an actress getting on stage or not, and we wanted the show to run as smoothly and efficiently as possible. I also considered all the details. One of my favorite things to mention is the closure mechanisms. So on the side seams where it came apart, I chose snaps for the first dress, since it was supposed to be magical, so it was completely silent. But with this dress, I used Velcro, so it sounded like it was ripping on stage. And though it's a little detail, it made it much more immersive for the audience. My last math trait is looking for and making use of structure. So this was a very short time frame. I only had about 4 weeks to get all these dresses done. So I used repeated reasoning to make it efficient. You can see these 2 dresses on stage are very different and used in different parts of the show, but they use the exact same skirt pattern. So I was able to just churn it out and do it as efficiently as possible, as well as doing repeat scheduling to make sure that everything was consistent and on time with the actresses. The trait that I chose to present to you all today was innovation and solution seeking. So this is something that we have never done before at this school, and I've never done before. So I had to do a lot of research, and not only research, but adapting that research to fit our theater and our production of Cinderella. So I was able to adapt all that to make sure that it fit, and it was running smoothly, and it worked for our show, as well as using the engineering process, which includes research, ideation, prototyping, and production. And this engineering process can not only be applied to engineering and sewing and that kind of stuff, but every aspect of life. So I'm going to be able to use that when I go into my future careers. I learned so much thanks to this production, from new sewing techniques to independence to time management. But my most impactful takeaway from this capstone project was its impact on the community. At first glance, it may not seem that a princess musical can make an impact on the community, but this is simply untrue. Cinderella was the first production we put on after COVID was pretty much gone, and we all know this was an incredibly difficult time. So getting to bring back the things that people loved was such a privilege. We didn't start a fundraiser or a nonprofit or anything like that, but we sparked joy. Sometimes a little bit of joy can mean all the difference. All the challenges I faced, like making sure everything was done on time and having a short time frame, it meant nothing when I saw and heard the little boys and girls falling in love with theater thanks to my costuming. This was an amazing experience that showed me that nothing is impossible. I always planned on going into engineering, either computer or civil, because I was afraid to follow my passion for sewing. This capstone project showed me, though, that my dreams aren't that far out of reach. I'm happy to say that I've been accepted to CSU for costume design and technology thanks to this project. Now that you've heard my experience, I implore you to support your local theater. You saw just one person's effort in a small production like this, and I'm one of millions of people in this field, and we do it all for audiences like you. Your support is what allows us to put on productions, follow our passions, and change lives. Thank you.
Gorgeous dress. Would you speak to agency and empowerment?
I certainly will. All right. Okay, agency, this is one that I was also considering sharing with you all today in my original project. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, I took, when I was researching, I was the one that discovered these dresses and just knew that I had the skills to create them. So I was the one that went up to Mr. Walter, our vocal music director, and said, hey, I got these skills, I want to do this for you, please let me do it. But I also knew that it was going to take a lot, which is why my goal originally was, if I wasn't to be a lead, I was going to do these dresses. So I took initiative on that and made sure that it was going to be realistic with my acting and head of wardrobe as well as being a student. And all of this agency was helpful in my future working or discovering my passion for working backstage and learning how to take agency and initiative in my future careers.
Thank you.
Of course.
Wow, is all I have to say. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I didn't quite catch it. Did you say that you were thinking about going into engineering?
Yes, I was originally going to go into computer engineering, but changed my mind after this project.
Do you see any connection between the two fields?
Certainly, definitely. I actually used this project as my engineering project for the semester in our engineering class because of how I follow the engineering process and how much research and prototyping it took.
I'm curious what your next steps are for you after graduation.
So, as I mentioned, I'm going into CSU for costume design, and I hope to refine my skills and make connections and move on to larger productions like tours and Broadway, hopefully designing and sewing those kinds of costumes.
Is CSU the only school that has costume design?
No, there's actually, it surprised me, there was a lot of costume design fields or just general technical theater fields in colleges all across Colorado.